All right, so I'm starting another one, and marking this one. No hat. That's how I'll do it. And I'm not going to say a lot about why I want to do this book. Um, as far as I know at this moment, it's not going out anywhere. It will go to one person, and from where that goes, I don't have a clue, and I don't worry about that shit. I love reading these books. And I'll continue to read these books probably till I die. I can't see me getting fucking bored of my format, and hopefully they just keep getting better. Um, I have no idea where it will lead, and I think that's part of the fun for me. Um, yeah, I ramble. That's what I do, and I try to. I'm trying to cut that back. Um, but I wanted to start a book today, and I've been kicking it around for a long time, and I've had it for a long time, and I haven't read it, and because I honestly can't read books unless I'm doing it this way. I don't know why. Okay, I can read them; they don't hit the same for me, and it seems pointless. It doesn't seem fun. If it's not fun for me, I don't want to do it. And this is fun. I don't know why. I think it's the sharing aspect. I also maybe I like editing a little bit and playing with it and stuff and shit like that. But whatever. If I want to fucking talk for a second, I will. And so yeah, I'm nervous about this book because I think this is one of the first authors that isn't dead, and he's out there and he's alive and it's his. And I don't want to fucking take away from that in any fucking way because, yeah, he's just means a lot. But, well, this copy in particular, yesterday, I've been in the woods for a few days. Um, and this book has been out there in those woods with me, because I was going to start it out there. And I'm going to tell a little story because I like it. I like telling stories. Um, in this cabin that I'm building, I've got a wolf spider. Okay, he sits in the top right corner of the cabin, like in between the loft and the where the computer's at, where my little station's at. And he's been there for 4 months. Named him Frankie. Could be Frenietta or whatever, but Frankie is who that is. And he's been living there. His fucking web is big and it's pretty cool. And he's like accepted me. He'll come out and he'll check on me and shit, kind of like a Charlotte's Web type deal. Well, I've been chilling, and checked on him as usual. And when I got there, and since I've been kicking this book around, I knew I couldn't start it like last week because it was there. So I've been waiting to get out there, and I got in there and I grabbed the book. All right, this is I'm kind of fucked up anyways, so this makes complete sense. But I pick up the book, and the book has been sitting underneath like 6 feet below it. I didn't realize it. And when I picked it up, I want to show you. It's probably just spider shit guts, but it's still really badass to me. I don't know if that's going to get picked up. This is Jason Bashir's The Lost Scriptures of Giza. And if you notice on the top, is around here, dude. That's like artwork from that fucking not the picture, but he added to the picture his own little artwork to the top of this book. And it's of course got to be in these weird drops that God only knows what they could mean. Maybe he's saying hello, maybe he's saying fuck off, maybe he's saying nothing. I don't fucking care. I was like, I got to leave it cuz he christened it for me in a weird way. So yeah, this book not only is special because the author is still alive, he's a great man, but that my spider Frankie decided to take a dump on it too and christen it for me. And I was like, fuck, dude. Well, I've got to read it. Got to read it. It's inevitable, number one. It's coming, but now it's just important. So yeah, hold on. Let me so I'm starting the I'm gonna do it again. This is the Lost. I can't see if this shit's coming through. The Lost Scriptures of Giza by Jason M. Bashirs of Archaics. And this is different, like I said, because I'm not wearing a hat. It's only book ever done. Naked faced to the fucking shitty light I've got right here. But it's cool because I like to mix it up a little bit, anyways. So, yeah. So, I want to do this. Okay, so I'm over here. First days are always tough for me because it's like, where do I go? What do I do here? All right. So, yeah. I'm nervous. Everyone always knows that I'm nervous. I don't have to tell anyone. This will be taking on the new format that I've been doing where I'm running through. I'll probably mix with the images in here and try to get them to go with the readings better. It's not easy for me. I'm working on it. So if anyone does see this, you're just going to have to fucking bear with me. It's just the way it goes. Okay? So I'm going to hit this over. This will probably change up a little bit. I just want to let you know. I'm going to start the beginning of this book. And I've been wanting to do it for a while, man. I've been really kicking myself. The Lost Scriptures of Giza, Enoch and the Origin of the World's Oldest Texts by Jason M. Bashirs. Book Tree, San Diego, California, 2006. This is second edition, 2017, apparently. I'll do the. I guess I can do the forward. Yeah, I'll do the forward. This work was originally published in 2006. The second edition has become necessary because research on these fascinating topics did not cease with the release of this book. The study of Enoch and the monuments he left to posterity has been continued in this author's other works. When the Sun Darkens was published in 2009, the work reveals that Enoch was a chronologist and prophet who was aware of the orbital secrets of a fragmented planetary body and visits the inner solar system every 138 years, anciently known as the Phoenix. This amazing orbital history is laid out for all to see, and the research reveals the true chronology of Earth's past and future, the dating of the apocalypse, the Sixth Seal disaster in 2040 AD, and the return of the chief cornerstone, also known as a prophetic countdown encoded within the Great Pyramid's exterior architectural features. The third book released was Anunnaki Homeworld in late 2011. In this heavily researched work, Enoch's ministry of prophetic engineering is laid out for all to see. As architect of Newgrange and Stonehenge, we find these monuments decoded into a linear timeline by a simple three-dimensional analysis. The Anunnaki planet Nibiru, popularized by Zecharia Sitchin, is shown to be returning to the inner system. It will arrive and pass close by the Earth in 2046 AD, pushing our planet into a tighter orbit around the Sun, which will end every terrestrial calendrical system, an event described in the Seven Trumpets of Revelation. Released a year before 2012, Anunnaki Homeworld demonstrates that the cherished dating of the 2012 AD for the end of the Mayan long count calendar is fundamentally wrong. The error is revealed, and through charts and irrefutable evidence, it is shown that the 13th Mayan Bakhtin actually ends with the collapse of time in 2046. Soon to be published is The Descent of the Seven Kings, a book having more about Enoch and the pre-flood world he lived in than the first three books combined. This tome is packed with chronological data that shows the history of the world through the window of 600-year epochs. In studying the two approaching global cataclysms of 2040 and 2046 AD, the book reveals a tremendous amount of information on the two ancient planetary destructions in 4309 BC and 2239 BC, the end of the pre-Adamic and pre-flood worlds. Further revealed in this book are the extensive zodiac codes, which are prophetic messages concealed within the concepts of star patterns of the 12 constellations. The theme of Descent of the Seven Kings concerns how the future future is the continuation and unfolding of events that have already occurred, is distant antiquity. The seven kings of the old world brought the pre-flood apocalypse and ruination of the world, just as they will again in the near future. They're destined to return to Earth in 2052 AD. Just as they ruled the world in the old Sumerian histories, they will rule it once more, for the seven kings are the major theme of the book of Revelation. Though these are the works in print, this series is by no means complete. 3 more books are being prepared for publication. Chronicon, Timelines of the Ancient Future, is a vast chronology of world history from 5239 BC to 2106 AD in the future. The timeline synchronizes over 40 ancient and more contemporary calendars and timekeeping systems into one comprehensive chronology of date indexes. This monumental research reveals the incredible patterns and geometrical relationships of events past and present. Nostradamus and the planets of apocalypse proves beyond any doubt that the French prophet of Jewish ancestry not only accurately knew the future of the last days, he dated the events. The prophet Nostradamus knew of the existence of planet Phoenix, its return in 2040 AD, the return of Nibiru in 2046 AD, the Great War of Islam and the West from 2016 to 2022 AD, and many other events of the last days. The science of calendrical isometrics is explained with over 100 examples provided from the annals of history. The author considers his greatest work to be Chronotexture, Lost Science of Prophetic Engineering. This book is filled with precise architectural charts showing how the internal arrangements of the Great Pyramid serve us as an exact rectilinear timeline of world history. Many authors have attempted to show this, but all have failed, and in Chronotexture, it might be texture. It's texture or texture. We will see how and why this came to be. Without an accurate chronology, previous authors were forced to manipulate architectural measurements that were scientifically made, opening themselves to censure and ridicule. Having completed all of these works, it has become necessary to update Lost Scriptures of Giza, supplement it with new additions. That the research is complete is not a claim one can honestly make. When writing about figures, projects, chronologies, and concepts thousands of years old, we are forced to play the textual archaeologist, ever building pictures out of pieces. And it is the inclusion of these new pieces that made this second edition necessary. Author, Jason Bashir. I'll do the prologue too. Mystery of the Pyramid Shape. Prologue. In the mists of distant millennia, hold on, and I'm not restarting it. Let me start off on the right tongue here. In the mists of distant millennia was built a colossal monument covered in millions of tiny writings. The structure was the epicenter of global pilgrimage and architectural legacy of arcane knowledge rooted in a world that no longer exists. This massive corpus of secrets from the archaic past, the present of their world, and the distant future was originally protected by keepers, but they violated their position as guardians of mankind, oppressing humanity until their sovereignty was fractured by an epic cataclysm that entombed the old world. At variance with the Creator, these beings waged a terrible war against him and the rest of creation. These guardians were among the first created. Their intelligence ancient and matched only by the seething hatred they felt for humanity. This animosity towards mankind was pronounced in the court of heaven by the word as blasphemy, for these newly created beings designed to tend and keep his garden were made in his image. The leaders of this angelic insurrection were imprisoned below the earth they were appointed to watch over, and God led mankind to construct a monument directly over the entrance to their prison, one that would not be opened again until the apocalypse. A stone guardian was sculpted out of the earth to keep watch over his holy monument, and the pyramid became, or triangle, became the universal symbol embodying the sacred secrets of the magnificent building. It is the icon of the arcanum of mysteries that the Great Pyramid was designed to protect. Though its origin lies in an obscure past, the Great Pyramid's foundation was laid exactly 666 years before a terrifying catastrophe fragmented the Earth, burying hundreds of millions of people and their cities deep below the surface in a series of meteoric, is it meteoric or meteoric? Meteoric impacts, tremendous earthquakes, volcanic explosions, and resurfacing of entire buried land masses, lakes and seas slipping from their basins, geologic upheavals, and the bathing of the planet in billions of tons of cosmic dust that rained as mud over land and sea. The marine mesosphere was emptied and collapsed to the ground. This dense atmospheric layer of water raining for weeks and plunging the world into a barren waste of oceans and ice caps. The ancients relate that the Great Pyramid was specifically designed to survive this disaster which had been foretold. Though its presence in the old world presaged death and ruin, it contains within it the beginning of the greatest gift from the Creator. It was sealed in the beginning because its purpose is in the end. This monument is a mine of enigmas, an artifact from a dead world, concealing an exact knowledge we can barely penetrate. It was made marvelously to be an enduring shadow of things to come, an arcane theology in stone that typifies eternal truths and images for the earthly comprehension of men. The secrets of 1,000 scriptures are unveiled within its manifold faces, corners, and corridors. A depthless mine of revelation. By intense scrutiny of the mysteries of the Great Pyramid do we approach the arcanum of truth, known simply as the Word of God. Long ago, this arcanum walked among men, teaching hidden wisdom and deep knowledge in the form of parables, for parables are images of truth masked in earthly symbols, and the greatest symbol of him on earth is the Great Pyramid, a parable of rock. Even centuries after the Great Deluge, pilgrims traveled from afar to gaze upon the highly polished white surfaces of the Great Pyramid. The learned from scores of cultures visited Egypt to study the ancient antediluvian writings found upon its base, casing blocks, copying down abbreviated versions of the histories of heaven and earth they deem most important. If you realize that the time that hidden within these fragments of divine truth spread across the world in cosmological text was concealed a body of teaching that would remain buried within the oldest writings in the world. Abraham was one of these pilgrims, a man of immense learning, acquainted with the holy inscriptions of his ancestor Enoch. Almost 4,000 years ago, this patriarch visited Egypt in search of the arcanum to unearth the past that he might glimpse the future. He is venerated by the adherents of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, and is the central figure to many amazing legends and traditions. Abraham at Giza discerned the truths of the old world, penetrated myth and lore, saw the invisible, uncovered the hidden, and divulged to men the long buried secrets of his most distant pre flood predecessors. It was he who discovered that the triangle concealed the greatest of all mysteries, a secret for humanity so incredibly wonderful that its existence caused a rift in the creation as forces beyond our senses fiercely contend over our right to enter into this inheritance. In essence, the lost scriptures of Giza were never really lost. They exist today and can be found in any well-funded university, library, found in the oldest writings in the world. Yeah, I'll do that one. Stop there for today. I can't wait to tell the spider I actually started this. This is great. Thanks, Jay. All right. Archive 1, The Pillar of Enoch, Memories of Enoch. A casual search through translations of the world's oldest writings uncovers a universal belief throughout antiquity that in a remote period during the world's infancy, a holy man by virtue of his faith was taken physically from earth by the Creator to rule with him in heaven. In the Genesis account, this man is named Enoch, the seventh descendant from Adam. References to him in Scripture are vague and scant, but there exists a wealth of data about Enoch and his writings in the extra-canonical, pseudo-paleographical, and apocryphal texts. Traditions and records of this strange man, a chronicler, prophet, architect, and king, later made emperor, are abundant, and many are detailed in Descent of the Seven Kings. Much of our knowledge about him derives solely from writings passed down from earlier writers, most having passed through the halls of Alexandria until in the last 140 years the wastes of Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon have yielded forth hundreds of thousands of cuneiform tablets. These ancient writings mention Enoch and many other biblical figures and events, and many of them claim to be copies of older Sumerian texts. In fact, much of the wisdom of the Psalms, Proverbs, Lamentations, and other wisdom literature of the Old Testament find their precedence in the Sumerian writings. The Sumerians held that long before a ruinous flood destroyed their cities and killed off the population, lived a powerful king named Etana who ascended into the heavens. Historians speculate that he ruled about 3100 BC. 2. Enoch was indeed alive at this time. As a chronologist prophet, it cannot be coincidence that the most ancient as well as sophisticated calendrical systems the world has ever known all began about this time. The Mayan long count system of 13 baktuns counting 144,000 days each for a total of 1,872,000 days until the collapse of time began in 3113 BC, 13-year variance. The Kali Yuga system, or Vedic chronology of ancient India, began a 3,100-year timeline to the appearance of the Savior. Scholars calculate the beginning of the Kali Yuga to be 3102 BC, 2-year variance. Amazingly, this corresponds perfectly to the 2 BC birth of Christ. The Sumerian king lists record that Etana ruled for 1560 years, which is 96 years short of the entire duration of the pre-flood world, 1656 years, which is obtained by calculating the references provided in the Genesis geological list for the 10 patriarchs before the flood. The Sumerian texts also relate that the world prior to the deluge was ruled by a lineage of 10 men who were later usurped by the 7 kings 600 years before the cataclysm. The king lists refer to them as kings, while the Genesis narrative calls them patriarchs. There are old Hebraic writings that convey that Enoch was not merely a prophet, but an emperor who ruled over many kings and princes. This will be shown herein. The decline of Sumer and later Akkads brought about the emergence of Assyrio-Babylonian cultures located along the Tigris and Euphrates rivers of Iraq. The dominant became the Babylonians, who kept records concerning one called Utapuzu. He was the seventh sage, who had an unusual ministry that involved the divine residence of the abyss, a spiritual prison realm wherein languished particularly ancient beings that had rebelled against the Creator and were confined under the earth until an appointed time. For this reason, they named him Utobozu, or Brother of the Deep. His ministry over, he was taken up into heaven and never seen again. Remarkably, this was the exact ministry appointed to Enoch in the Book of the Watchers, more commonly known as the first 36 chapters of the Book of Enoch. Enoch was God's earthly voice and messenger. So perfect was his testimony among the inhabitants of the earth and to those beneath it that the Creator entrusted him with the divine knowledge of the past, the present, and the future, with intimate knowledge of the apocalypse that would one day afflict all men and the treacherous angels. Many are the fragmented traditions and historical annals that mention this figure, his incredible life and accomplishments. Unfortunately, these are passed off as relics of myth and fable, having moral rather than historical foundation. Most of the writings mentioning Enoch are outside the fold of accepted scripture. In the biblical records, there are but 3 passages that refer to him, yet he is more popularly remembered by the nations of old than Adam, Noah, and even Moses. Only Abraham and Nimrod can boast a greater remembrance. Interestingly, Adam, Noah, Enoch, Abraham, and Nimrod are found by various titles and names many times in the stories of the Old World, but Moses is unknown outside Hebraic writings. Hold on one second. I'm not used to these without a hat. This is not to infer that he is a fiction. His history only involved the Egyptians and an Israelites, and 80 years of his life was spent in the wilderness. Enoch is found in the memories of cultures from the Far East to the distant shores of ancient America. From the snow-enshrouded north to the sub-Saharan Africa, Enoch left a psychic imprint upon the imagination of mankind, and with the approach of the last days, his writings have become popular again, just as they prophesied they would be. An unknown scribe over 2,000 years ago happened upon a very old book known to us today as the Book of Sirach. In his preference to the translation that he composed after discovering the text among the aged records of his people, Sirach wrote, "I found a book of no small learning, therefore I thought it most necessary for me to bestow some diligence and travail to interpret it." In describing the text he wrote, "It containeth therefore wise sayings, dark sentences, and parables, and certain particular ancient godly stories of men that please God." The Book of Sirach is an extensive text found today in most apocryphal collections. The book details the lives of many biblical people like Adam, Noah, Abraham, Isaac, and David, but Sirach reads, "But upon the earth was no man created like Enoch, for he was taken from the earth." And it is within these cryptic words in the Sirach text that the latent mysteries of apocalypse and resurrection began to unfold. The early Hebrews and later Jews passed down many books such as this one that are not included among the books of the scriptures and hardly known outside academia. It is within the pages of these texts that we learn so much concerning the enigmatic patriarchal prophet. The Book of Jubilees was a popular work of rabbinical literature that outlines the history of the earth chronologically by depicting events as they relate to the patriarchs. In this is written, he, Enoch, was the first one from among the children of men that are born on the earth to learn writing and knowledge and wisdom, and he wrote the signs of heavens according to the order of the months in a book. Book of Enoch. He was the first to write a testimony, and he testified to the children of men concerning the future generations of the world, and what was and what will be he saw in a vision of the night in a dream, as it will happen to the children of men in their generations until the day of judgment. He saw and learned everything and wrote it as a testimony and laid the testimony on the earth over all the children of men and their generations. Enoch's ministry was apocalyptic, on one concerning judgment. Though it will require substantiation through other sources, it can be assumed that this testimony that would be accessible to future generations laid upon the earth by the prophet before the flood was a monument of some kind. By the end of this book, you will have no doubt. Even older than the Sirach and Jubilees writings is an historical tomb from extreme antiquity, so old that even in the days of the renowned Jewish historian Flavius Josephus 2,000 years ago, the book was largely unknown and forgotten outside of the temple in Jerusalem. This book is more extensive than any of the biblical writings and is itself mentioned by name in the biblical books of Joshua and 2 Samuel, both references reading, "Is this not written in the book of Jasher?" Josephus wrote that by this book are to be understood certain records kept in some place on purpose, giving an account of what happened among the Hebrews from year to year, and called Jasher, or the upright, on account of the fidelity of the annals. A copy of this book was found in rabbinical Hebrew, discovered in Jerusalem when the Roman general Titus, son of Emperor Vespasian, destroyed the city and looted the temple before destroying it as well. The book of Jasher is said to be one of the few manuscripts secreted out of the Alexandrian library in Egypt just prior to its ruin by Islamic armies. In 800 AD, the book was rediscovered by the Anglo-Saxon scholar Albanius Alucian, who translated it from the Hebrew into Latin. Another copy survived the centuries of book burnings brought on by the Inquisition and was printed in Venice in 1613. 8. I'm not sure I should have paid attention, but I'm not sure what 8, 9, but he's doing it. I'm not sure I'm supposed to read them or not. But I haven't been reading them, so I'm not going to read them. 8. A very damaging forgery of the Book of Jasher was published in 1751 in England. It was republished in Bristol in 1829 and poorly written works of 62 pages that make Jasher to be one of the judges of the Old Testament. Had this plagiarist known that Jasher literally means upright and was a description of the text's historical integrity, he would not have committed so blatant an error as to claim that Jasher was some hitherto unknown man in biblical history. But the damage was done. To the 19th century critics and scholars, the forgery provided the prejudice enough to shun academia away for good. In the face of higher criticism, the real Book of Jasher, was fated to live on in obscurity, suppressed by those would have greatly benefited the world by studying it. Though the Royal Asiatic Society discovered yet another copy of the Book of Jasher in Calcutta, this fascinating chronological record of the pre-flood world and ancient history thereafter is only now beginning in the 21st century to gain prominence among serious researchers. 10. Though the forgeries of Jasher were many, there were some 19th century historians who recognized the importance of these records, writers who contributed to our understanding of the accomplishments of Enoch and the world he lived in. In 1875, the authors Hodder M. Westrop and C. Standaland Wake both referred to the Book of Jasher as a credible source of historical information in their own book, Ancient Symbol Worship, a work that extensively expounds upon the religious antiquity. 11. A translation of Jasher they cited in their research was by Dr. Donaldson, which was in its second edition. In 1883, Gerald Massey cited the Jasher writings in his huge work entitled The Natural Genesis. 12. Because of the amazing facts and formerly forgotten information found within these two books, Ancient Symbol Worship and The Natural Genesis, as well as other works by Massey, these books will be cited over and over again in our journey to understand Enoch and his times. The Alcyon translation of 800 AD reads, "And the soul of Enoch was wrapped up in the instruction of the Lord in knowledge and in understanding, and he wisely retired from the sons of men and secreted himself from them for many days. And all the kings of the sons of men, both first and last, together with their princes and judges, came to Enoch when they heard of his fame, and they bowed down to him, and they also required of Enoch to reign over them, to which he consented. And they assembled all 130 kings and princes, and they were all under his power and command. And Enoch taught them wisdom and knowledge and the ways of the Lord, and he made peace amongst them, and peace was throughout the earth during the life of Enoch. And Enoch reigned over the sons of men 243 years, and he did righteousness and justice with all his people." 13. The identity of Enoch as having ruled over 130 kings and rulers who established an empire that endured 243 years, a regent spiritually attuned to the Creator, who also left upon the earth an enduring testimony designed to last until the last generations, could not possibly have been forgotten. As we will see, there remains astonishing confirmation concerning the antediluvian king and the legacy he left behind, still standing silently upon the Giza plateau. The geographical location of this testimony left on earth by Enoch and the fact that his reign endured 243 years links us to another body of ancient literature that provides us with a better understanding of the prophet's ministry concerning future generations. When Adam was 687 years old, Enoch was made king. The Book of Adam and Eve 2, another text once housed in the famous Alexandria Library. Adam said to Seth before he died in the year 930 Hebrew reckoning, "Hereafter a flood shall come and overwhelm all creatures and leave out only 8 souls. But, O my son, let those who it will leave out from among your people at that time take my body with them out of this cave, and when they have taken it with them, let the oldest among them command his children to take my body and lay it in the middle of the earth shortly after they have been saved from the waters of the flood. For this place where my body shall be laid is the middle of the earth. God shall come from thence and save all our kindred. 14. Adam concluded by telling Seth, Behold, I have revealed unto you the hidden mysteries which God had revealed to me. 15. Enoch was an initiate through the Spirit to these hidden mysteries and was aware that the middle of the earth held a particularly special significance to his own apocalyptic ministry concerning the future epochs of humanity. All right. 15 minutes. I really want to get here. I want to keep going. Adam concluded by telling, see, I know though, when I want to stop, I should stop. So I'm going to stop because when I push myself, then I don't pay attention. So I'll keep that in mind, but I'm getting to pictures and I'm not sure when I'm supposed to put the pictures in. And so I'm hoping it's going to kind of tell me. So I want to keep going, but whatever. It'll all unfold as it's supposed to unfold. Now, if this God blessed thing. All right. Page 18. Adam concluded by telling Seth, Behold, I have revealed unto you the hidden mysteries which God had revealed to me. 15. Enoch was an initiate through the spirit of these hidden mysteries and was aware that the middle of the earth held a particularly special significance to his own apocalyptic ministry concerning the future epochs of humanity. In a vision preserved in the book of Enoch, we read, And I went thence to the middle of the earth, and I saw a blessed place in which there were trees with branches abiding and blooming of a dismembered tree. And I saw a holy mountain, and underneath the mountain to the east there was a stream, and it flowed to the south. Enoch looked, and to the east there stood another large mountain, and to the west was a smaller mountain of lower elevation. Enoch asked an angel with him about his blessed land with its 3 mountains, and he was informed it was an accursed valley, and the angel Uriel told him that it was at that place that the cursed be gathered together in that place of judgment in the last days. 16. In Enoch's vision is introduced the symbol of the pillar, dismembered tree, an image of vital significance throughout this work. The pillar, represented by 3 mountains, stood at the center of the earth. This anciently universal concept is the focus of Archive 2. After disobeying God and eating of the tree of knowledge, Adam erected an altar to him in an act of penance for the forgiveness of his trespass. In this passage in the book of Adam and Eve, the word, or is that Adam and Eve 1? The word of God appeared and said to Adam, And as thou didst build an altar, so also will I make for thee an altar upon the earth. 17. The book of Jasher conveys that Adam died at 930 years of age in the 243rd year of the reign of Enoch. 18. This was the year that saw Enoch's final year. Jasher reads that Adam died because he ate of the tree of knowledge, he and his children after him, as the Lord God has spoken. 19. Another formerly lost book integral to our study from Alexandria is the Book of the Secrets of Enoch, a writing last edited by a Greek in Egypt during the early church period. Attributed to Enoch, this writing was lost for over 1,200 years and has only resurfaced from manuscripts from Russia and Serbia, a fact that has earned it the title of Slavonic Enoch. 20. It was rediscovered in 1886 by Professor Solokokov in the archives of the Belgrade Public Library, having remarkably survived the church burnings. The popularity of secrets was largely due to the renewal of interest in Enochian writings after the publication of Richard Lawrence's translation of the Book of Enoch in 1821. 48 years after the Scottish explorer James Bruce discovered copies of the formerly lost Book of Enoch in Ethiopia in 1773. 21. In this writing, Adam was commanded by God to preserve the sacred books and writings of Adam and Seth, and they perish not in the deluge which I shall bring upon thy race. 22. These books contain many of the secrets of God and the creation learned by early men, and it was Enoch's duty to ensure that these writings and mysteries would not be lost in the cataclysm known as the flood. These divine instructions were given to Enoch, who passed them down to his sons at the death of Adam, the 243rd and final year of the prophet king's reign. Two old manuscripts, both having survived millennia at separate locations, mentions the 243rd year of Enoch. It was at that time, according to the book of Jasher, that the prophet learned that he was to ascend into heaven and not return. The text reads, Enoch assembled all the inhabitants of the earth and taught them wisdom and knowledge and gave them divine instructions. And he said unto them, I have been required to ascend unto heaven. I therefore do not know the day of my going. 23. We gather that the divine instructions that he gave his people, the Sethites, before the flood, concern the preservation of knowledge imparted by God to humanity from the days of Adam, King Enos, the priest Jared, Enoch's father, and Seth. The charge given to Enoch by Adam concerned records of great importance. It would make little sense to go through heroic efforts to save mere books which could be easily protected from the elements by those surviving the deluge. This must have been a truly colossal collection of knowledge, as we will find herein. These divine instructions concerned a massive construction project designed to preserve the writings of the old world in such a way that humanity would gain access to them once again at a future date, long after their own world was gone. Such a method of preservation would require a monument sufficiently large enough to survive the waters of the flood. In the sight of all men, Enoch ascended into heaven on a cloud, and according to the secrets of Enoch, the Sethites' descendants immediately went to work. Methuselah, son of Enoch, was his brethren. All the sons of Enoch made and erected an altar at the place called Akozan, whence and where Enoch had been taken to heaven. 24. This was the altar of God promised to Adam, and it was built at the middle of the earth where the Sethites were to bury their forefather Adam, the same location Enoch vanished from. As found in the book of Enoch, some time in his prophetic career, he had a vision of the Great Pyramid and its relation to the Tree of Life. He called it a mountain of fire at the middle of the earth, a description that we shall learn that was employed by the ancients when referring to the monument. Enoch describes its stones as brilliant and beautiful, splendid to behold. An angel tells Enoch, that mountain thou beholdest, the extent of whose head resembled the seat of the Lord, will be at the seat on which shall sit the holy and great Lord of glory, chief cornerstone, the everlasting King, when he shall come and descend to visit the earth with goodness. See Enoch 24, 1, 2, 8, 25, 1. That Enoch fully understood the mystery of the coming of the Son of Man. The Christ is clearly seen in Enoch 46, 1-3, where we find that Enoch at the court of heaven beheld the Ancient of Days, Creator, and another figure named the Son of Man, who would come to earth and break the power of the mighty and lay low the kings of the world. It was revealed to Enoch that the Son of Man was ancient, his name invoked in heaven before the sun and stars were created. He, Christ, would be a support pillar for the righteous and shall be the light of the nations. The mountain of fire at the middle of the earth is imagery of high antiquity found in the earliest cosmologies, cosmologies and traditions from around the world. In the Herder Dictionary of Symbols, we find clearly that it is associated with the concept of the altar. The altar is a very old universal image considered long ago to mark the center of the world. In Latin, altar is altus, meaning high. The connection between the Savior and the form of the pyramid concerns light. He is the light of the world, and pyramid is the Grecianized word describing the old Semitic words urim middim, or light in the middle. The proofs linking the pyramids with the altar and center of the earth motif is the focus of the next archive. It is here that we can detect a pattern that runs consistently through the body of Scripture. Enoch received divine instructions that he, in turn, passed down to others that carried them out. This was the construction project known as the Mountain of Fire, or Mountain of God, the altar of Adam at Achuzan, where Enoch disappeared. Over 13 centuries after the completion of the Great Pyramid, Moses, also from Egypt, departed in the Exodus and received divine instructions from God that he passed to others who carried them out, building the tabernacle and Ark of the Covenant. He also received the tables of the law, which he passed down to the people, which were spiritually instructive patterns for righteous living. About 18 centuries after the Great Pyramid was finished, King David received divine instructions from the Lord that he passed down to his son Solomon, who set out and had the temple built in Jerusalem. All of these things were to be shadows of things to come. Even the candlesticks were patterned from these holy instructions. 25, 26, and 27. Men are the means by which the Creator builds great things on earth. It has been the habit of men since time immemorial to erect colossal stone monuments in the commemoration of important historical events at the Great Pyramid, and the Great Pyramid was no different. It cannot be argued that the geographical location where a mighty king turned emperor who was a prophet that vanished into the sky would not have been marked as a sacred spot by those who witnessed the event, a holy site to be remembered and protected. This altar constructed by the Sethites was the mountain of God. It was the testimony of Enoch laid upon the earth that contained the ancestral records from God that he passed down to Adam and Seth. By its placement at the center of the world's geographical land masses, it represents the pillar, dismembered tree, called the Axis Mundi, world axis, where stand the three mountains, holy to God, that serve to remind both men and angels of the secrets of judgment, redemption, and resurrection. Built to be protected from water, the structure also served to remind the people that survived the next flood would be of fire. Concerning these Sethite architects before the flood, Josephus, almost 2,000 years ago, wrote, "They also were the inventors of a peculiar sort of wisdom which is concerned with the heavenly bodies and their order, and that their inventions might not be lost before they were sufficiently known. Upon Adam's prediction that the world was to be destroyed at one time by the force of fire, at another time by the violence and quantity of water, they made two pillars, the one of brick, the other of stone. They inscribed their discoveries upon them both, that in case the pillar of brick should be destroyed by the flood, the pillar of stone would remain and exhibit these discoveries to mankind, and also informed them that there was another pillar of brick erected by them. Now this remains in the land of Ciris to this day." 28. Much of the contents of the Enochian writings are astronomical. This knowledge, though known to have been recorded upon pillars, must have been inscribed upon unusually large monuments. True pillars were not made of bricks, and knowledge can be preserved in scrolls or tablet collections, so we can see here that the volume of information they sought to preserve must have been immense. The use of pillars to describe stone monuments of importance is an occultic method designed to conceal the true nature of the information conveyed in the text. The pillar is a truly archaic symbol employed by arcane scribes that will be examined thoroughly in this work, an image even found in the scriptures in the description of an altar located in the land of Egypt. This passage is in Isaiah's writings and reads, Isaiah always keeps coming up, "In that day shall there be an altar to the Lord in the midst of the land of Egypt, and a pillar at the border thereof to the Lord. And it shall be for a sign and witness testimony unto the Lord of hosts in the land of Egypt." This esoteric passage in Scripture beautifully conceals the secret of the Great Pyramid at Giza, though the text itself appears to be contradictory. This altar is the pillar erected by the Sethites, though the altar is in the midst of the land of Egypt and the pillar is at the border. There is only a conflict in meaning to the uninitiated, to those having no knowledge of what the pillar truly signifies. Earthly pillars were long ago erected to mark and identify earthly boundaries, but this pillar marks the border to the land, Lord. As this is the dismembered tree of Enoch's vision, this pillar in the midst of Egypt is an axis point linking heaven to earth and earth to the underworld. The identity of Egypt as being the location of this monument is further validated by Josephus, for Sariad is an epithet descriptive of the land of Sirius worshippers, Egypt. Josephus quotes the Egyptian priest historian Menetheo, who wrote that long ago Thoth, the Egyptian version of Enoch, scribes of the gods, inscribed all knowledge upon stela known as the Seratic columns. The belief was later filtered into Asia Minor and among the Greeks. Plato wrote about these two columns, pillars, in the opening of his Timaeus. He wrote that the entrance to Atlantis' temple was guarded by two pillars, one made to be imperishable to fire and the other indestructible by water, both covered in valuable knowledge. These are the same as that mentioned by Josephus, who wrote that they remained even to his day 2,000 years ago. The two gigantic pyramids are these monuments, but there is only one great pyramid. Only from a distance do these structures appear equal in size. This will be explained more in depth later in this book. These huge pillars upon the Giza plateau are accompanied by a third, much smaller pyramid. According to Scripture, by the testimony of 3 witnesses is a thing established, 30. And as will be shown, this has never been truer than with the 3 silent pyramids in Egypt. The name for the Great Pyramid complex today is Giza, an ancient title of uncertain origin and etymological relic from an extinct language that is amazingly partially preserved in the Secrets of Enoch text as Akuzan. Among the oldest languages in the world, the phonetic hard consonants k, ch, and g were interchangeable. Akuzan resolves the a, guzan, prefixed by the a because this merely denotes a geographical location or area. Several centuries ago, the site was called Giza, and it appears to be derived from the Hebrew geza, or the stalk of a tree, pillar, which is akin to the Semitic gazit, a word remarkably meaning hewn stone. 31. It is an amazing revelation to find that this phonetic fossil survived the translation from the elder pre-flood script, probably Sumerian, into Akkadian or Babylonian cuneiform, and eventually Hebrew to the Greek and Latin, but ultimately into Slavonic in the space of millennia, to be compared with what the area is called today with little difficulty, Giza. The Giza complex, with its 3 massive pyramids, 2 of them truly colossal, was built from divine instructions imparted to mankind through Enoch before the Great Flood in an effort to preserve the holy writings of the antediluvian patriarchs. Giza contains the altar of God at the middle of the earth that serves symbolically as the pillar that marks the spiritual boundary that all men must one day pass through. This is further evidenced in the almost prehistoric root word for both Akuzan and Giza, guz, which means specifically to pass along, 32. As it is written, we are sojourners here, and so also is Giza, a place of passage. Giza protects a silent message of universal importance that is only now being decoded and understood. By his translation from earth to heaven, Enoch's life and disappearance embodied the hope of all men to be redeemed and raised up in resurrection. His writings and the myriads of variant beliefs concerning him have left behind mysteries, entire occult systems, creeds, and whole religions. This pre-flood prophet gave us the key to the scriptures in the visage of stone, monuments that protect the greatest secret in the creation. All right, page 25, Mystery of Zion. The patriarch Jacob was given a new name, Israel, which his descendants adopted as the name of their nation. Though they were ultimately the direct descendants of the Chaldean Abraham, a sage of immense wisdom who had studied in the house of Noah long after the deluge, the nation of Israel had its beginning in the land of Egypt. From the careful preservation of very old traditions, antedating even Abraham and stretching back to the pre-flood world, the Israelites maintain a deeply rooted belief in the future paradise world, an enormous and holy city of God represented in the sacred writings of their forefathers as a great mountain wherein the eternal righteous will dwell when the heavens and earth are renewed by divine fire. This majestic mountain city will be the capital of creation, containing the temple of the living God, and within its walls would be found the tree of life and rivers of living water. It is simply referred to in Hebrew lore and scriptures as Mount Zion. When the Israelite families in their infancy in the 17th century BC suffered through the famine in Canaan, they found refuge and food in Egypt. They settled in Goshen near Memphis, a region located around and to the north of the Great Pyramid site. The monument had been erected by their Sethite ancestors, and the site was already considered as holy. In the Exodus, the Israelites quite naturally could not take Mount Zion with them, so they transplanted the ideal, and for this reason, we discover a most unremarkable mountain group as being called Zion in Scripture. Upon settling Canaan, the Israelite noted that a mountain cluster situated at the southern terminus of the anti-Lebanon range had three peaks close enough together to serve them as a substitute for the Giza complex's three great pyramids. This mountain group was named Zion 33. This region was venerated by the early Canaanites and their Phoenician and Aramaic neighbors. According to the Deuteronomy text, it was called Sirion by the locals, which was special to the Sidonians. It was also called Mount Shetnir by the Amorites and was also known as Mount Hermon, 34. Hermon means a sacred or consecrated mountain. The names given to this particular mountain group in northern Israel, with its three peaks covered in white snow, revealed that they share a common belief with the surrounding peoples, a remote memory of a similar place important to their ancestors. As migrating cultures often do, the Canaanites, Phoenicians, Armenes, Amorites, and the Hebrews affixed place names from their history and legends to distinguishing landmarks in their newly occupied territories. The earlier title of Shenir was probably a reflection of an ancestral homeland called Shinar in Genesis, where the human family after the flood quickly grew into a populous mass. Sirion appears to be related to Sarad in old designation from Egypt, as seen in Josephus's account concerning the two great pyramids identified as the pillars of Sarad. As Hermon, we see that this place was identified with Hermes, the god of boundaries, identified with the Greek god Terminus, according to the authors of ancient symbol worship, 35. Terminus represents the end of a measured area. Hermes is known also as Mercury, the messenger of the gods, scribe of the gods, this deity having developed from very old stories about Enoch, who ascended into heaven. This ascent is recalled in the imagery of Mercury, who had wings attached to his boots. Also, Hermes was the god of pillars. Because this mountain group marks the general division between Israel and the northern Canaanite nations, it was called Hermon. In ancient symbol worship, we learned that the earliest forms by which Hermes was represented were a large stone, frequently square, or the triangle shape was preferred, sometimes an upright pillar and sometimes a heap of rude stones. Greeks called these monuments Hermae or Hermene heaps, and they were used as landmarks. 36. When the Israelites occupied Canaan, they called the mountains Zion through the actual place of Zion, and its knowledge antedates the exodus and conquest of Canaan, which occurred in 1447 BC, in the year 2448 from man's banishment. Even at such a distant time in history, the writings of Enoch were known, and his vision of the blessed land with three divine mountains was remembered throughout the old world before and after the Diluvian catastrophe. Enoch was remembered by many different names, and as we shall discover, one of these was Hermes. Earlier, we found that before the flood, Enoch laid a testimony upon the earth that was to survive the ages of mankind and the flood as well, to be rediscovered and comprehended by future generations of people towards the end of the present world concerning the judgment that would soon befall the entire world. This testimony laid by Enoch was the monument erected by his sons and kin the Sethites, who preserved this knowledge in the form of the pyramids, knowing that these structures, due to their center of gravity and sealed white limestone casing blocks that weighed 20 tons each, would be able to withstand the might and violence of the chaotic floodwaters. This testimony was specifically designed to warn the world to come of the second flood that would transpire in the last days, a deluge of fire. In the exact same passage where this testimony of Enoch is mentioned in the book of Jubilees, we read that there are 4 places to the Lord on the earth, the Garden of Eden and the hill in the east in it, the hill of Sinai, where Moses received the law, and the hill of Zion. Concerning this 4th place, holy to God on earth, Zion, the Jubilees text continues with a statement that Zion will be sanctified in the new creation for the sanctification of the earth. Through it, the earth will be sanctified from all its sin and its uncleanliness from generation to eternity. 37. This passage identifies Zion as an altar, for it is at the altars where the blood of sanctification purifies the uncleanliness from the sinner. Thus, Zion is the altar promised to Adam who had repented of his sin. Zion is the altar in the land of Egypt at the border to the Lord, described as a pillar by the prophet Isaiah. By claiming that it is one of the 4 holy places on earth that will be sanctified, exhibits to us that it is an actual site in the world today and is not complete and will not be until the new creation. The real mystery of Zion is that no one has yet discovered that it is simply the name of the Great Pyramid. The word is a compound of both a Hebrew and an Egyptian root word. In Hebrew, Zai denotes a barren place, like a desert. On was the ancient name for the Egyptian city of Memphis, later called Heliopolis, located only a few miles from the Great Pyramid and in the heartland of Goshen. This combination of Hebrew and Egyptian, Zion, means holy place in the desert, according to Mustafa Gadala in Historical Deception, the Untold Story of Ancient Egypt. The geographical location of Zion is also described in the Book of Jubilees, which further identifies it with the Giza monuments. According to this account, shortly after the flood, while Noah was still alive and very old, this aged patriarch assembled his sons, grandsons, and families. They numbered 70 patriarchs of all the clans on earth, and they divided the world by drawing lots, which signified where these men would take their families to build their cities and nations. And there came out of the writing as the lot for Shem, the middle of the earth, which he and his children should have as an inheritance for their generations unto eternity. And he, Noah, remembered his word which he had spoken with his mouth in prophecy, for he had said, Blessed be the Lord God of Shem, and may the Lord dwell in the dwelling of Shem. And he knew that the Garden of Eden, the Holy of Holies, the dwelling of the Lord, and Mount Sinai, the center of the desert, and Mount Zion, the center of the navel of the earth, these 3 opposite one another, were created as sanctuaries. 38. This passage is very important to our understanding of Giza. The Israelites, as an infant nation, were born in Egypt, living in an area of the Delta region called Goshen, where the Hyksos authorities permitted concentrations of Semitic peoples to occupy as they ruled over Lower Egypt from avarice. At the southern border of Goshen lied the Giza complex, which has been shown by many authors to be the center of the Earth's land masses. As Eden was a sanctuary to early man, protecting him from the harsher conditions of the wild earth, Goshen was a sanctuary to the Israelites and other peoples who had taken up residence in Egypt during the Great Famine in the 17th century BC. Goshen further protects the Hebrews from the terrible plagues and ecological destruction that led to the Exodus. The same year, they surrounded the sanctuary of Sinai and received the law inscribed initially by the finger of God. The land of Canaan later became their sanctuary, a land believed by many to be the site of the pre-flood Garden of Eden, a region that even in 1447 BC, according to the report of the Israelite spies, was full of gigantic grapes and produce, the land of milk and honey. These 3 points, opposite one another, form a geometrical triangle. The Israelites, who represent all true believers, have not yet completed the triangle, for they have yet to return to Giza, to return to the altar of the living God, to receive sanctification and eternal cleansing. The identity of Zion has always been a mystery. In Scripture, it is mentioned so many times that it becomes redundant and easy to overlook, rendered commonplace and therefore unimportant. But for those who seek, there is to be found an undercurrent of ancient theology embedded in the passages concerning Zion that are profoundly linked to the history and mystery of the prophet King Enoch. All right, page 29. Coptic Traditions of the Pyramids. The Alexandrian Library was founded by the Egyptian ruler Ptolemy, a Macedonian, formerly a general under Alexander the Great, sometime between 319 and 313 BC. This library became the largest repository of ancient texts in the entire world, containing 500,000 writings on clay tablets, stelae, wood tablets, papyrus rolls, parchments from the Near East, Phoenicia, Syria, Asia Minor, Greekdom, Judea, and from Egypt and Libya. Many of these texts were all that remained of the archaic cultures that left them behind, some being in languages not even in the Alexandrian scribes could decipher. This vast archive of historic writings was assailed by the Romans, later by fanatical bishops, leading Christians' purgings of the papacy with the greatest loss of texts in 642 AD by Muslim conquest. As we have seen, the Book of Jasher, among others, were secreted away before the library was totally lost. In religious fervor, the Arabians destroyed the majority of the writings that had not been filtered out throughout Asia Minor, Babylon, Persia, and Europe, but there were scholars among the Muslims that also stashed away particular books that interest them in much the same way as the Dominicans and Jesuits of the Inquisition publicly burned thousands of books banned by the papacy only after they had themselves secured their own copies. Unfortunately, many people were burned in the forbidden books they had been caught with. Burned with the forbidden books they had been caught with. The Vatican Library is a collection of writings that were obtained in this way. What has intrigued the Arab scholars more than anything else in the halls of Alexandria were the records concerning the Great Pyramid. The history of Egypt and the construction of the Giza complex were unknown to them, and they had always assumed that it was the Egyptians who had built them, an assumption passed off as fact today by established academia. But this is not what is conveyed in the earliest records. We are especially grateful to these early Arab historians for their careful preservation of the Coptic records, great men of learning such as Ustad Ibrahim ben Wasif Shah Soyuti and Mohammed ben Ayas, who had written a book called The Wonders of Different Countries, still extant today in the British Museum as manuscript number 7503. Also found in the British Museum is manuscript number 7861 called History of Egypt. Two other significant chroniclers were Akbar Esman and Yukut, the latter having his record preserved today in the Bodleian Library. 39. These writings and others were all compiled by Arab scholars of late antiquity, like the famous Masudi, who died in 967 AD, leaving behind an incredible text that concerns none other than Enoch himself. Surid, one of the kings of Egypt before the flood, built the two great pyramids. The reason for building the pyramids was the following dream, which happened to Surid 300 years previous to the flood. It appears to him that the earth was overthrown and that the inhabitants were laid prostrate upon it, that the fixed stars wandered confusedly from their courses and clashed together with a tremendous noise. In another vision, he saw the fixed stars descend upon the earth in the form of white birds, and seizing the people, enclose them in a cleft between two mountains, which shut upon them. Early in the morning, he assembled the priests from all the norms of Egypt, 130 in number. No other persons were admitted to this assembly. When he related his first and second vision, the interpretation was declared to announce that some great event was to take place. 40. At this assembly was discussed several of the dreams that the priests were having as well, in particular one of a deformed people that was invading from the east to ruin them. This revelation is consistent with the several accounts about the mutant and hybrid gigantic peoples of the nations called the Nephilim, later in scripture referred to as the Anakim, the Rephaim, Emims, and Zuzims. These were the offspring of the Anunnaki, or Watchers, called the Nephilim in Genesis 6, ancient giants that terrorized mankind, prominently found over and again in the Book of Enoch. These giants were a contributing factor leading God to destroy the entire planet's surface with water. After the departure of Enoch, the power vacuum was filled by the Nephilim peoples and the world sank into a mirror of anarchy, debauchery, and violence. Their fathers, the Anunnaki, or those who from heaven to earth fell, are the subject of this author's books, Anunnaki Homeworld and Descent of the Seven Kings. They indulged in forbidden hybridization programs using human females to sire their sons, programs involving even animals and plants. The histories of the giants are the central theme to the oldest writings in the world, including the Epic of Gilgamesh. They are the foundation of Greek lore, the War of the Titans and Giants in Beowulf, and they are found in traditions around the world. The history of the Sethites before the flood, the Israelites after the flood, are filled with giants as found in the Book of the Watchers. Other Enochian writings, Jubilees and Jasher, the Testaments of the Patriarchs, and many other extra-canonical texts. Though the Nephilim are not the focus of this work, we find here that the Coptic records are very consistent with what we already know concerning the civilization after Enoch's departure, the pre-flood world. Masadi's account is astonishingly similar to the story of Enoch in the Book of Jasher. Surid, being a Coptic, Enoch received his prophetic insights from a dream and was served by 130 priests, just as Enoch ruled over 130 kings and princes. Further, Surid dreamed of two great mountains that were involved with a judgment from heaven, just as Enoch in a vision beheld two great mountains near a third one of lower elevation at a site the prophet was told was a place of judgment. Both Surid and Enoch beheld a cleft or valley between these mountains where the damned were cast. This vision was of Giza before its construction by the Sethites after Enoch's disappearance. Surid, having witnessed the same vision, ordered the pyramids to be built and the predictions of the priests to be inscribed upon columns, pillars, and upon the large stones belonging to them, the pillars. And he placed within them his treasures and all his valuable property, together with the bodies of his ancestors. He also ordered the priests to deposit within them written accounts of their wisdom and achievements in the different arts and sciences, the writings of their forefathers, likewise the positions of the stars and their circles, together with the history and chronicles of times past and that which is to come, and to every future event. 41. And with this excerpt from Masadi's text is our proof that Enoch was remembered as Surid by the Copts. Enoch received divine instructions that commanded him to preserve the writings of his ancestors, Adam and Seth, both patriarchs having received revelations directly from the Creator. The pillar motif is again employed in this text and even described as having been made up of large stones, this being descriptive, as we will see in Archive 3, as being the gigantic white limestone casing blocks anciently covered in writings along the monument's base. The burying of these ancestors is a reference to the burying of Adam, where he was to be deposited at the middle of the earth, as well as Seth. This identifies the Great Pyramid as being the altar of God promised to Adam, built in Egypt. These monuments were specifically constructed to withstand the force of the flood, to carry their ancient secrets and knowledge into the newer world after the predicted cataclysm. Mere pillars, as we understand them today, could not have been sufficient for such a task, for the world of that time was full of ordinary pillars, and none of these have survived. Only monuments the size and weight of the pyramids would have survived. There are some other intriguing statements found in the Coptic records that provide additional details not found in the Hebrew writings. The Egyptian Copts wrote that underneath the pyramids, at a depth of 40 cubits, approximately 66 feet, were subterranean halls containing all manner of wisdom, the names and properties of medicinal plants, the sciences of arithmetic and geometry, that they remain as records for the benefit of those who could afterwards comprehend them. 42. Also, these Coptic traditions mention that the pyramids were assigned a guardian. 43. If indeed the pillars of the Sethites are the great pyramids of Giza, then somewhere close by we should find some architectural evidence of their protection in the form of a statue or monument that would serve them as a guardian. As we know, this has been found. The Sphinx, as the largest surviving statue from the ancient world, is also on the Giza Plateau with the pyramids facing east. Much more will be revealed about his mysterious guardian later in this book. It is the opinion of many scholars that Surud was not an Arabic invention. Historians and scholars have long noted the remarkable ability of Arabic historians and chroniclers, translators who took it upon themselves to perfectly preserve hundreds, if not thousands, of texts originally found or housed in Alexandria, Egypt, into their Arabic. It has been shown that the Arabian scholars passed down the traditions of the Great Pyramid Complex with a little or no deviation from the parent sources for over 1,000 years. 44. Even today, it is difficult to maintain historical annals and keep them unchanged from decade to decade. As older books are reprinted, inconsistencies are introduced as modern misconception taints the texts. Over 120 years ago, Gerald Massey, in his The Natural Genesis, wrote that Surud was a title possibly derived from Seret, an Egyptian designation for keeper, measurer, builder. 45. Massey also cited Josephus concerning the pillars of the Sethites built in Serad in his colossal work entitled Ancient Egypt, Light of the World. Excuse me. He wrote that Serad may have derived from Siri, an Egyptian word meaning south. 46. With either Babylon or Jerusalem, the seat by which scribes and archaic chroniclers composed their histories, the south was the oldest designation for Egypt. The north was Assyria, the east the designation for Persia and Elam before that. The west was the sea or those western Semitic peoples along the Mediterranean coast and the Isles. Whatever Surd actually means, it is apparent that the Copts recorded traditions passed down from predecessors in Egypt concerning a famous builder in their history. This we know from the Hebrew Judaic text as Enoch, a prophet, historian, chronicler, architect, astronomer, and keeper of the secrets of God. It may be inferred that by calling the builder of the Great Pyramid Complex as Surud, the Copts did not actually know his name, that Surud is merely a personification of the geographical designation of Sarai, or Sariad. Yeah. Though it is Mossadi's record that follows the Hebraic records, the closest concerning Enoch and the monuments, other Arab historians had much to say about the Gizian relics. An early Arab writer named Jafar ben Mohammed Balkai, an astrologer, same as astronomer in those days, wrote that the pyramids were built for refuge against an approaching destruction of the world, which was foreseen by wise men previous to the flood. 47. Abu Muhammad al-Hassan ben Ahmed wrote, the pyramids were antediluvian and they resisted the force of the great flood. 48. Ben Hamed relied upon the records of Akrizi, an Arab chronicler largely believed to have been Mossadi himself. I think that's how you say that. Probably the most persuasive argument for the pre-flood origin of the Giza pyramids was simply stated by Muhammad ibn Abd al-Hukam when he wrote that the pyramids were built before the deluge. For that, if they had been after that event had taken place, some positive and certain accounts of them would have remained. 49. And with this in mind, we shall peruse the many other fragments, both Egyptian and Greek, of the origin of the Great Pyramid and the history of the person of Enoch. All right, page 34. Greco-Egyptian fragments, because the foundation of the Alexandrian library was from the Macedonian rulers of Egypt, beginning with Ptolemy. A considerable amount of Greek traditions and records ended up in the halls of the famous library. The scholars that spent their days translating these texts and accounts immediately perceived in them the parallels between the Greek memories and those of ancient Egypt. An old Egyptian deity having fallen into disrepute, but anciently venerated, was Set. This was an early Egyptian memory of Seth, who, with his kin, erected the pyramids at the disappearance of Enoch. Later Egyptians, having contact with the Greeks, saw in the god Hermes all the attributes formerly attributed to Set. This discovery led to the borrowing of chronicles, and soon, within the space of a few centuries, an entire genre of Greco-Egyptian literature was born that was early on used as a source for much of the Coptic and Gnostic writings and beliefs. As time passed and newer texts were assimilated into the growing genre, other historic and mythological characters were found to have the same characteristics and histories of Set and Hermes. Such comparative studies gave birth to a species of study and wealth of literature now called Hermetical, and one of its most famous contributions was the Divine Pymander. This book was believed to have been written by Hermes, who allegedly lived prior to Moses, and is laden with astronomical and astrological information, esoteric lore, and wisdom. 50. The figure of Hermes came to be regarded as deity, but many writers long ago admitted that he was an ancestral figure. Cicero is his De Natura Deorum Lib 3 wrote. Cicero is his De Natura Deorum Lib 3 wrote. Although a man, he was of great antiquity, and he built Hermopolis. Hermopolis is a Greek city. 51. Hermopolis is a Greek city for Hermes, and thus identifies him as a builder. The divine Pymander reads, Hermes, he understanding all things, who also saw the whole of things together, and having seen, considered them, and having considered them, was powerful to explain and show them. For what he understood, he committed to characters, concealing the most part, being silent with wisdom, and speaking opportunity, in order that in all the duration of the world thereafter should search out these things, and thus having ordered the gods, his brethren, to become his escort, he ascended towards the constellations. 52. And thus we have the Hermetic Enoch, but this is not a new revelation discovered of late by this or any other modern author, but was known even as early as Cencellus, who wrote that Hermes erected stone stelae before the flood that contained the arcane knowledge of astronomy. 53. Also, in the Syrian chronicle of Bar Hebraeus, we find that Hermes invented letters, types of architecture, built cities, established laws, and taught astronomy and the true worship of God. 54. In fact, Bar Hebraeus, which means son of the Hebrew, even refers to Hermes as being the Enoch of scriptures. Around 1050 AD, a monk named Cedrenius studied apocryphal writings that were attributed to Hermes, who he associated to Enoch, who, foreseeing the destruction of the world, had inscribed the science and astronomy upon two pillars, one of stone to resist the element of water, and the other of brick to withstand fire. 55. This is noteworthy, for Cedrenius lived contemporary with some of the Arab historians who were in possession of the Coptic traditions concerning Surid and the traditions of the Great Pyramid. Even then, Cedrenius linked these pillars to the person of Enoch, the pillars having been mentioned by Josephus in the same way. The Arab historian Makrizi also linked Hermes to Enoch. 56. In every way, Hermes was to the Greeks what Enoch was to the early Hebrews. He was the first master of the arts and sciences, called ruler of the three worlds, heaven, earth, and underworld, the scribe of the gods, and the keeper of the books of life. 57. Books attributed to Hermes were therefore priceless to antiquarians. One such man was Cosmo de Medici of Florence, Spain, who sent out agents all over Europe to search the libraries of old monasteries for forgotten writings of the ancients. In 1460, one of those agents, by the name of Leonardo da Pistoia, discovered a Greek manuscript, a codex containing 14 treatises attributed to Hermes Trismegistus, or the Thrice Great. This was the nucleus of the Corpus Hermeticum, 58. In Book 3 of the Corpus Hermeticum, we read that shortly after the creation, when men began to multiply upon the earth, the gods sent forth many souls clothed in flesh so that men could survey heaven, the paths of the heavenly gods, planets, the works of God, and the activity of nature, so that they should know the signs of what is good, the power of God, and the turning fate of good and evil things, and discover all the marvelous works of good men. So men began to live and understand the destiny assigned to them by the course of the circling gods, leaving great memorials of their work on earth. Their name remains until the darkening of ages. 59. This obscure Hermetic fragment seems to preserve elements of the Edenic, I can't say that word, Edenic story of clothing mankind with mortal bodies, antediluvian astronomy, the interactions of heaven and earth, and the memory of great architectural memorials erected by the first men. Note this curious phrase, their name remains until the darkening of ages, because the actual name of the people that we call Sethites, after their patriarch Seth, son of Adam, is long lost. We see in this statement a more hidden meaning. This passage tells of ancient memorials of their work, and interestingly, the Semitic word for name is Shem, which can also be translated as monument. Thus, their monument remains until the darkening of ages. The association in antiquity between the concept of one's name and the preservation of one's memory by the erection of a pillar or memorial, both called Shem in Hebrew, offers us a penetrating glimpse into a body of ancient mysteries that will be explored in this book. Just as the Greek peoples were a composite culture of many, the Ionic, Doric, Danoi, Archaeans, Spartans, Thracians, and Macedonians, with many subcultures throughout the Aegean and Mediterranean, so too was Egypt divided by many peoples who supported its many cults and priesthoods. Even Egypt was divided between the factions of Upper and Lower Egypt. In Upper Egypt, to the far south, were the temples and cult centers of Luxor and Karnak, in Thebes and Dendra and Abydos, which were all in a sort of theocratic competition with another, with the northern priests of Memphis and Lower Egypt. These rivaling factions of the two lands knew of Hermes by his older Egyptian title of Set, of Thoth, and of Amahotep. The Greeks highly venerated the strange god Thoth, for in him they saw their Hermes. The early form of Thoth was as Tuat, a title associated with Set. On the inscription of Tahatmes, on the inscription of Tahatmes upon the stele of the Sphinx, we learn that the epoch of the first time, or Zeptepi, stretches back to a primordial era of Sut, who was regarded as the inventor of astronomy. 60. This is a condensed form of Seth, or Sethites, whom Josephus wrote were the inventors of astronomy. Amazingly, the ancient Egyptians held that Tuat erected two pillars, and according to the Egyptian historian Manetho, who studied at Alexandria, these two pillars were to be found in the land of Serad. 61. These things were not unknown to the earliest Egyptians, for it was they who wrote the inscription of Tatmes at the feet of the Sphinx towards the end of the second millennium BC, when the Sphinx statue was excavated from out of the desert sands. Their own writings identify Giza as being the Serad, and no matter how unrelenting the modern Egyptologist continues to be, the Egyptians themselves never claimed to have built these amazing structures at Giza, and we have no authority upon which to rely but the records they specifically left behind for future generations to find. There are many fragments that could be extracted from the vast amount of Egyptian records that are relative to this study, too many to expound upon, but of particular interest is the person of Imhotep. This man was a prophet, healer, sage, mathematician, architect, an artisan, an astronomer, and virtual master at anything he set out to accomplish. He lived before the pyramids were built, but during his life he received the plans on how to construct them and a dream he was given from heaven, 62, in the same way that Enoch received the divine instructions on what the blessed land looked like, with its two tall mountains and third mountain of lesser elevation, Giza. The two pillars cited in these traditions are no doubt references to these two gigantic pyramids. This belief in the import of the two pillars is of extreme antiquity and was the inspiration for the erection of two lofty pillars at the city of Hierapolis. In Dede, Syria, Lucian claims that these pillars at Hierapolis were connected with the Greek myths of Deucalion and the flood, 63. Deucalion was the Greek Noah, builder of the ark and survivor of the flood. The stories of him were connected to these two pillars. The stories of him were connected to these two pillars demonstrates the merging of traditions with the passage of time, for the two pillars at Giza were designed to survive the flood, a feat which they accomplished just as the faithful Noah survived as well. The rivaling Egyptian cults and priesthoods gave birth to secret societies and underground occult movements that later resurfaced in the halls of the Library of Alexandria and from there spread throughout the Mediterranean coast, the Aegean Isles, into Spain, Italy, Sardinia, Crete, Libya, Arabia, Judea, Greekdom, Asia Minor, the Near East, and Persia, as far as India to the west at Carthage, and ultimately into the hands of Christians spread throughout Europe and Muslim scholars accompanying the armies that spread Islam far and wide. With the Roman Empire fallen and fragmented, the Vatican became the central authority over religious thought that emerged into one of the most powerful political forces to have ever ruled Europe. The Vatican became a knowledge filter, and the Inquisition served as its tendrils of censorship as Dominicans and Jesuits set out over all lands under Roman Catholic authority and confiscated all those texts that they brought enlightenment outside the fold of traditionally accepted scriptures. The Holy Writ itself denied the people. Scripture was for the clergy in Latin and not to be spread among the people's language. Only at Mass were the people to be exposed to the Word of God, and in a language few of them knew. During these centuries of intellectual oppression of the Dark and Middle Ages, the subversive and clandestine, secretive societies thrived and their membership swelled, with people hungering for more than what the official church offered. These grew under church tyranny into full-scale underground movements that gave rise to such popular orders known today as the Freemasons and Rosicrucians, two organizations that held Enoch in esteem and protected manuscripts about him and his achievements. Even the system of degrees of Masonic hierarchy recognizes this in the Royal Arch of Enoch degree, identifying him as an architect. The icon by which the world knows the Masons today is the Great Pyramid. As the Protestant movement spread across Europe and wrested away the Roman Church's power over the Holy Writ, the need for these secret societies abated. What was once done in hiding among the faithful in fear of church persecution was now done openly, and the word became widely published, for the Protestant movement unfolded in tandem with the invention, mass production, and wide-scale use of the printing press. No longer having to transcribe literary works by hand, the Word of God spread through books across the face of the earth. Like the Egyptian priestly factions, Protestants too split among themselves into various orders and denominations, as interpretation of the Holy Writ varied among its adherents. The publication of the Word and emergence of many churches outside the Roman fold greatly diminished the need for these underground movements. But as churches became more puritanical, even fanatical. The old texts that had fueled the faith of those originally oppressed by the religious authorities were now found to be obsolete. Admittedly, not a part of Scripture, the common people regarded these. Admittedly, not as part of Scripture, the common people regarded these texts little to none at all, and it was now the clergy, even Roman officials, that preserved them as they became rare and disregarded. We can thank the Freemasons for the preservation of many of these writings, and what they have saved among their own archives is nothing less than astonishing. Okay, page 39. Masonic Records of Enoch. Masonic historians have preserved traditions concerning Enoch, recording that the prophet before the deluge had a dream that inspired the building of a ninefold temple. This monument was built with the aid of his father Jared and son Methuselah, both Sethites, but no one in those days understood the strange purpose to this temple except Enoch 64. This is consistent with what we have thus far seen, and the Jasher records insist that Jared was alive for centuries after his son Enoch vanished. Masonry is divided into two distinct bodies of teachings or rituals, the ancient rites and the modern rites. The 13th degree is among the ancient rites, and according to the book of the Ancient and Accepted Rite of Scottish Freemasonry, the 13th degree is interestingly called the Royal Arch of Enoch, or Master of the Ninth Arch. Under this degree, the initiate is taught that Enoch built monuments before the flood, one structure erected to hide a cube of agate with a golden triangle that in itself contained the secret name of God. After building this temple, Enoch then built around and over it another structure of great stones. He is also taught to have erected two pillars before the great flood, one of granite and the other of brass. The granite pillar has inscribed upon it the description of the subterranean vaults laid by Enoch, but it was washed away in the flood. The brass pillar contained rudiments of the arts and sciences, and was later found after the flood of Noah, by Noah, 65. One of the earliest Masonic manuscripts concerning these two pillars is called the Inigo Jones document from 1607 AD. This text was considered one of the ancient charges of Freemasonry that was destroyed in 1720. The only surviving copy was found in the Masonic Book of Constitutions. This book details that before the flood, the sciences of geometry, masonry, music, metallurgy, and weaving were preserved because of the coming of a great catastrophe. These children knew well that God would take vengeance for their sin either by fire or by water, wherefore they wrote their sciences that they found on two pillars that they might be found after Noah's flood. One of the pillars was marble, for that will not burn with any fire, and the other was laternus, for that will not drown with any water. On account next is to tell you truly how and in what manner these stones were found whereon these sciences were written. 66. This document reveals that these antediluvian pillars erected by Enoch were found and excavated after the disaster during the reign of a king called Ninus, who, as we learn from the erudite Alexander Hislop, in his penetrating work entitled The Two Babylons, was merely an Assyrian title for the person remembered as the Babylonian king Nimrod. So we have it related that it was during the infamous Nimrod's rule that the Great Pyramid was rediscovered. The discovery of the location of Giza was made in the year 2076 Annus Mundi. As this is not a work on chronology, this author has endeavored to restrain himself from dating every single historical event mentioned in this book in the interest of brevity. Thank you, Jason. For those seeking a chronology of events involving the pre-flood and post-flood histories, see When the Sun Darkens, Anunnaki Homeworld, and Descent of the Seven Kings. All three of these books are works on chronology. But for our purposes here in exploring the Masonic history, the Annus Mundi chronology was developed in Alexandria in response to the plethora of writings and chronologies studied there that all seem to refer to a beginning date, which was represented as year 1 of the Hebrew chronology. Annus Mundi literally means year of the world, but this was only conceptual. The ancients believed the calendar began with creation, thus the description Annus Mundi, whereas the Hebrew narratives began with the curse. The calendar began with the banishment of mankind from Eden, as found in this author's other works. The date of the flood is astronomically fixed at 2239 BC and independently verified by other dating systems and chronological studies having no relation to the authors other than the fact that the arrived at date for the flood was 2239 BC. In the Hebrew narrative, the Great Flood occurred in the year 1656. Again, many chronological works and scholarly studies independently relate this fact. So, if 2239 BC of our calendar was the year 1656 Annus Mundi, Hebrew reckoning, then 2076 AM was 420 years after the flood, or 1819 BC. As can be found in the books mentioned above, both Nimrod and Abraham were alive in 1819 BC. At the exact date Nimrod ruled under the throne name Amraphel, the dynastic name Hammurabi, and the Sumerian title Amar Udaak, which was conveyed in Babylonia as Marduk, Merodach. And during this time, Abraham, according to the Genesis record, was in Egypt. Such an account of the post-flood discovery of writings was antedated. The deluge is consistent with another historical account as found in the pages of the Book of Jubilees. And Canaan grew, and his father taught him writing, and he went to seek for himself a place where he might seize for himself a city. And he found a writing which the forefathers had carved into a rock, and he read what was in it, and he found that there was written within it the science of the watchers, by which they had seen the astrology of the sun and moon and the stars and all the signs of heaven. And he wrote this down and did not say anything concerning it, for he feared to speak to Noah concerning it, lest he be angry with him on this account. 67. Prior to the Babel catastrophe, the Sumerian culture thrived, having been descendants of the original survivors of the flood. Before the language rifts occurred, Sumerian was the universal language, and the oldest Near Eastern texts found to date are in Sumerian ideograms. The learning Canaan received was in Sumerian, and was in Sumerian, and any old writings that survived the floodwaters were also Sumerian. Such a conclusion was made by the Masonic historians as well. The Wood manuscript dates from 1610 and is believed to be more reliable than the Indigo Jones manuscript. This text begins by relating to all the sciences akin to masonry and declares that geometry is the greatest of all sciences. It also mentions two pillars after Noah's flood that still existed. One of these pillars was found to still have writings on it of all the secrets and sciences of the old world that it was destroyed in Sumerian, from which the Sumerians developed a moral code that they passed on to the Egyptians through a Sumerian man named Abraham who traveled to Egypt. 68. The legend of Enoch's pillar is derived from these traditions, a myth that asserts that there is a pillar of knowledge built by the prophet that contains all the secrets of the world. While this is partially true, referring to the Great Pyramid, some groups in the past have taken the pillar angle to literally that they claim to have found it in the object of some old dug-up relic. Such was the case with the Knights Templar, who claimed that long ago they had discovered a small artifact in the form of a pillar broken into 3 parts, which they claimed was Enoch's pillar. 69. There are fragmented memories of Enoch and the pyramids from all over the world. Many of the secret societies obtained writings that drew upon these sources. Philo Alexandrius took such information from the older Phoenician annals, which were rich in Semitic histories that state that the first 2 inventors of the human race were brothers named Upsaranius and Ossus, who consecrated 2 pillars long ago, one to fire and the other to wind, 70. Diodorus, relying on older books, claimed that the Great Pyramid was constructed by one called Chemist. He claimed that the monument had been there for 34 centuries. 71. Even the Arab historians had borrowed much of their information from the old Sabaeans, a people of high antiquity and civilization spanning back to the days of Job in the mid-second millennium BC. These people left records claiming that the Great Pyramid was a tomb housing the bodies of the patriarchs Seth and Idris, Enoch of the Quran, 72. Enoch is a constant character, and his life the theme of many arcane writings and annals. His name has been found upon stone tablet texts in cuneiform from the Near East, discovered upon the archaic king's list of Summer, and heard from the tongues of even primitive peoples who still pass on his histories, though they long lost the meaning of what they relate. But there is much more to this story. The Gizian relics were not made merely as repositories of ancient information to be gleaned by the post-apocalyptic survivors of a flood, but this monumental area serves another purpose, one you will never forget. Okay. Archive 2, Symbols of the Godhead upon the Earth. Hold on, let me get my light. Yeah. Arcane images of the divine pillar. The Great Pyramid's identity as the altar of God in the land of Egypt, built for the redemption of a lost humanity by architects before the flood, is evident from so many corroborating accounts. But the numerous references to the pyramid complex being a pillar from so diverse sources requires an intense scrutiny into the mindset of belief systems no longer extant today. In order to understand the pyramid's origin, function, and future purpose, we must first comprehend how certain images became attached to it. The ancient widely held that an immense pillar was fixed at the middle of the earth. It served as an earthly marker to the border of the Lord and was God's earthly witness to the world of his promises made to the first men concerning humanity's terrestrial death and future resurrection, an event that will occur only once this planet is sanctified at this altar. This monument, according to the prophet Isaiah, was a sign located in Egypt. Amazingly, the prophet Jeremiah also confirms this indirectly, writing that the Lord has set signs and wonders in the land of Egypt, even unto this day. 1. Evidently, the 8th and 7th century BC Hebrews were aware of the Giza monuments and their connection to God. An Egyptian text that may refer to them also was cited in Davidson's epic work entitled The Great Pyramid, Its Divine Message, on page 371, which reads, "The God of the universe is the light above the firmament, and his symbols are upon the earth." The word pyramid is of rather late construction and was not used in distant antiquity in referring to the Giza monuments. Pyramids were originally called pillars before and after the Great Flood for reasons that can only be explained by careful analysis of the truly fundamental characteristics of the pillar as a necessary item of architecture. In 1939, an antiquarian named Robert B. Stacy Judd wrote that in Seeking the origin of the stone column pillar, we learned that its prototype was a wooden member such as a trunk, stock of a tree. 2. And such was the development of all primitive cultures to build with the wood of trees before acquiring the skill of masonry to erect pillars of stone. To early man, the tree itself was a symbol of profound mystery and vertical bridge between heaven and earth and the underworld. Its boughs and branches high in the air typified the heavens and sky, but these were attached to a support, the stock or trunk of the tree, which was firmly placed on the ground, burrowing deep with roots stretching into the underworld. The pillars of temples long ago represented the trees of sacred groves. Long prior to Muhammad in Arabia, the pillar in the tent at the oasis or sanctuary served to identify the holy tree. 4. The pillar, even anciently, was the continuation of the symbolism of the mysterious tree. Though the majestic stone pillars erected by the Sethites over 48 centuries ago were one thing, esoterically they were something else. This is best explained in the Hebrew word for pillar, which is matzbeth. I can't say it. Matzabeth, meaning monumental stone, something stationed, while also meaning stock of a tree, pillar. This word is akin to matzbah, memorial stone, pillar, or mazabah, a stone erected to be a marker. 5. There are some authorities that even assert that the Hebrew words here mean architectural structure. 6. Not much has changed in that part of the world. Even the Egyptologists term the oldest stone structures related to the pyramids as mastabas, a word derived directly from the old Semitic words for pillar. Mastabas are box-shaped buildings that serve as lids over the top of well mouths. 7. Roughly pyramidal in shape. Here we delve yet deeper into the layers of symbolism. Those peoples living before the Great Flood cataclysm were very aware of the prophecies widely spread concerning the Diluvian disaster. Because it was thought that the world would be flooded from waters issuing forth from the underworld, early man maintained the custom of keeping massive stone lids atop wells to prevent the flood. So profound a fear was this belief of waters from below that even after the Great Deluge, the tradition was renewed and practiced. 8. Even in the oldest book of the Holy Writ, the book of Job, we read, "The waters are hid as with a stone." 9. It cannot be left unmentioned here that far below 10, the Great Pyramid is a well of uncertain depth, now filled with rubble. The monument was not constructed over it casually, but the entire architectural passage system descends directly to the underground chamber where the well is located. The two largest pyramids at Giza are indeed the two pillars of the Sethites, a fact seemingly remembered by the Sumerians. This incredibly advanced and archaic civilization maintained clearly in their records that their history was divided between time periods both before and after the flood. Their memories of the erection of the colossal pillars may be reflected in their term for twins, which ultimately mirrors the old Semitic words for words just examined, mashtaba. 11. From the remotest times, the pillar was used to identify something upon the earth, but they served also a dual function. They supported ceilings as architectural pieces while also displaying artwork, precious objects, and idols. But the most common use of the pillar long ago was the preservation and conveyance of messages. Pillars were covered in writings and pictures that gave elaborate testimonies concerning history's conquests, the reigns and deeds of kings, laws of the land, and they were frequently used to mark boundaries, while they were ornately covered with the inscriptions that affirmed land ownership and deed transactions. In essence, pillars have always been used to display knowledge. In the second millennium BC, Near East property was marked by pillars with inscriptions and sometimes pictorial representations. In Hebrew, the word gabul, usually translated as landmark, actually means border or boundary. The erection of a pillar to mark someone's boundary was long regarded as divine law. Even the biblical book of Proverbs reads, "Remove not the ancient landmark which thy fathers have set." 12. According to the authors of ancient symbol worship, the pillar was used to consecrate a special geographical place. 13. The Sumerian king list was inscribed upon stone columns and pillars called prisms, records of rock concerning the cities, kings, their reigns, and other particulars of interest both before and after the flood, as well as the various sages that served them. The most famous one is preserved in the Ashmolean Museum at Oxford, England. 14. One of the greatest historical centers of learning and knowledge in the world was at Egypt under the Macedonian regents at Alexandria. The renowned library there housed replicas, translations, and copies of texts from pillars taken from all over the Greek-touched world. Epigenus recorded that the Babylonians made records of celestial observances dating back to archaic time carved into pillars. 15, a practice they learned from their Sumerian predecessors. Moses of Corian wrote that a book had been discovered at Nineveh in Assyria, which was translated from the Chaldaic into Greek by order of Alexander the Great, which contained historical records of the distant past, histories that were found engraved upon a pillar. 16. Archaeologists excavating Babylonia from under the arid desert wastes have uncovered a memorial stone at Merodach, Baladan the First, 1320 BC, that calls upon the infernal deities. All the gods on this stone tablet, whose emblems are seen, violently to destroy the name of he who moves this boundary stone. Among the emblems upon this stone is that of a winged dragon. 17. Remember this discovery, for it is a window into the ancient mindset. To destroy one's name was to completely end the one who retained it. A person was his name. The connection between memorial stones and dragons is one that will be seen as this study continues. The two pillars of the Sethites were built after Enoch received the divine instructions that he had passed to his relatives before his departure. There are many who believe, and with good reason, that the references to two pillars has a more important meaning. It is held that there may have been two entirely different architectural complexes having pyramids that were by the Sethites, and that the Great Pyramid Complex in Egypt is only one of them. We recall the traditions that one pillar was to remain for 1,000 years until the flood, which would destroy or bury this architectural relic, and the other was to survive the violence of the Diluvian cataclysm and to be an enduring sign and witness to future generations that the world would be destroyed again by fire, a flood of fire. Bearing these things in mind, we shall now examine the enigmatic etymology of the word pyramid. In the Old Testament books, the Hebrew word for pillar most commonly used was amud. 18. This is akin to the Arabic imad, which means both column and pillar. It was the Greeks who first merged this older Semitic word with their own root word for fire to create the word pyramid. 19. The Greek root per is an old root for which other modern words developed, such as purge, pure, purity, purify, and impure. It is a word simply meaning fire. 20. The Platonists likened the symbol of the pyramid as their symbol for the element of fire. 21. The symbol has been recognized as the universe. I don't have to fucking say it. The symbol has been recognized as the universal image of fire in ancient India and the nations of the Near East, and even in more contemporary times, occultists and witches employ the symbol in their representation of fire. 22. The Greeks considered the pyramids to be pillars of fire. In the old text, divine Pymander, Hermes asserts that fire was the chief medium by which the Creator made the world. He reasons that flames are in the shape of a pyramid because of the way they burn, the flame tips pointing upward, forming points. 23. The Hebrew writings tell us that before Solomon's temple stood two pillars called Boaz and Jachin. The biblical meanings of these two titles are he shall establish and in its strength. 24. But these are esoteric interpretations, for the actual translations of Boaz and Jachin are different. Hold on. But these are esoteric interpretations, for the actual translations of Boaz and Jachin are different, perhaps remnants of the forgotten phonetics of an elder speech already extinct as a mode of communication by the days of David and Solomon. Boaz is constructed from roots meaning haste, motion, bow, and fire, az, while Jachin derives from jarak, a root for moon, the sun and moon. Masons have long held that these two pillars withheld a great deal of secret knowledge. 26. These pillars were a mystical reminder that the sun and moon, as computers for time were designed as signs for the constant observances of men. The use of twin pillars representing mysteries of the deity was also discovered at the ancient temple of Hercules at Tyre in Phoenicia, where one stele was in the form of a pillar and the other as an obelisk. 27. There is little difference. The obelisk is a unification of the pyramid and pillar, being four-sided like a pyramid, but elongated like a pillar. At its base is a foundation stone, and its summit bears a miniature pyramid. Most often, upon obelisks, the pillar surface is covered with hieroglyphic records and inscriptions. Over 200 years ago, the mystic Francis Barrett wrote that the ancients were willing to deliver great mysteries in sacred letters and explain them in certain symbolical figures, pyramids and obelisks, to the fire. Harold Bailey, in his exhaustive work Lost Language of Symbolism, 1912, wrote that the pillar symbol represented the gateway to eternity, 29. The author of Nature Worship, 1929, identifies the obelisk as a shrunken, vertically thin pyramid that seems to embody a secret that was ancientest among the ancients. 30. We do not think in terms of words and phrases. The activity of the human mind thinks in images and pictures. Early sages recognized this and naturally employed the usage of familiar symbols to represent the images that they knew and conveyed. The scribal art made it easy for a writer to conceal his subject matter beneath a veil of normal images while also delivering deep truths to those who understand the dual application of the imagery. Symbols are thought fossils, enabling the masterful scribes of old to weave arcane things under modern guises. Porphyry wrote that the ancients were willing to conceal God and divine virtues by sensible figures and by those things which are visible, yet signifying invisible things. 31. The invisible things were those of the spirit, which to the initiates were the only things that were actually real. Everything on earth known to men were only copies, reflections of something spiritual. Stobaeus in the 5th century AD cited Hermes as saying, all things then, those upon the earth, are not truth, but imitations of the truth. 32. The use of the word pillar for pyramid is no exception. The ideas attached to the image of the pillar are very old and embody a forgotten theology lost to the modern world that requires a delving into the oldest writing on earth to remember. Not even is mankind exempt from being a mere imitation of something greater. The Holy Writ declares that we are made in the image of God and after his likenesses, but the physical world is only a reflection of the inner belief systems mankind holds as true, and for this reason God is viewed as black to Ethiopians, as Asians to Orientals, or white to the Occident. On one of the images by which early man depicted or imagined God was as the sun, for it provided humanity all the things needed to live comfortably on earth. Diodorus Siculus wrote that they adored the sun as expressing the likeness of the deity. 33. The sun was a constant daily reminder of the presence of the Creator as it emerged to begin another day. Not only the sun, but the planets too were regarded in like fashion. The Greeks watched the heavens religiously and claimed that the regularity of the passage of the planets and the stars in their cycles, orbits beginning ever where they end, was a modular image of eternity. 34. And considering that our study involves a monument of God in the land of Egypt at Giza, it is a profound thing to realize that in the text called Hermetica, we find that Egypt is an image of heaven. All the operations and the powers which rule and work in heaven have been transferred to the earth below. 35. Francis Barrett was a researcher of old occult studies and writings over 200 years ago. In his work called The Magus, a complete system of occult philosophy, he wrote, The wisest ancients knew that in nature the greatest secrets lay hidden, but as in these later days men gave themselves almost wholly up to vice and luxury, so that their misunderstandings have become more and more depraved, till being swallowed up in the gross senses, they became totally unfit for divine contemplations and deep speculations in nature. 36. God, in his infinite wisdom, designed the mundane mechanics of our world we all take for granted as similitudes and images of far more important spiritual truths. The sun sets, bringing the dark as the world is immersed in shadow, presaging death and ruin, but the moon, as a lesser light, provides an unspoken hope of a greater light to come, another day. Then the sun emerges and vanquishes the darkness, foreshadowing the hope of resurrection. For this reason was Christ titled the Sun of Righteousness. 37. Even our planet's history serves as merely a type. Mankind was made from the elements of the earth, and this old world, because of the rebellion of humanity, was destroyed and made over by the violence of the great flood, which resulted in the birth of a new world where men could start over, just as the sinner's total immersion under the water of baptism symbolized their new beginning and walk with God. In the future, the world will be made to burn in terrestrial fires caused by a celestial cataclysm, just as the people of earth will pass through divine fires of the Spirit. And it was for this purpose that Enoch was given divine instructions to have a pillar of fire, pyramid, built on the earth to warn future generations of the apocalyptic fires that will destroy the world by the very element by which he had created it. A common denominator between the widely divergent pyramid traditions discussed throughout this book is that they were covered in the inscriptions of the knowledge of the pre-flood world in an effort to preserve this information for people after the deluge. These writings concerned the past, the present, histories of those days and future. This alludes that the information was of divine origin, for it is by inspiration that one can know the future. Like the pyramids, the oldest writings in the world have all been found on stone. Stone is a symbol of permanence. 38. And it was used for the inscriptions of the Sumerians on stelae, prisms, tablets, pillars, and temple facades, be the stone natural rock or of human manufacture. Later, Babylonia, Akkad, Ugarit, Ebla, Assyria, Mari, Mohenjo-daro, Egypt, and many other cultures left to us today many writings because they had been preserved in stone. Had only wood, parchment, vellum, skins, or some other perishable mediums been employed, our knowledge of the ancient world would be nil. Our idea of a book in these modern times is very different than that of early man. To them, a book was any container of knowledge. A temple room exhibiting 4 walls covered in hieroglyphic text was a book to them, no different than a series of colophon connected clay tablets in cuneiform telling of the creation of the world. The series of tablets was a book. A man could choose one of the heavily scripted pillars in a temple complex and spend a long time reading the text, just as another man employed attendants who dutifully unfurled an old leather scroll as he patiently read the material. To both men, they were reading books. Quite literally, the pillars of the Sethites were books upon enormous monuments of stone, tiny writings along the lower courses being tantamount to entire editions of modern encyclopedias. These books were left so that people in the future beyond the Great Flood could learn that there was indeed a Creator and that He had a plan. Today we refer to the Scriptures as the Word of God, but where exactly did it come from? There are 12 definitive colophons in the Genesis narrative that demonstrate that at one time the Genesis text was divided between 12 tablets. It will be shown in this book that much of the biblical material found in the scriptures today actually came from the surface writings once adorning the Great Pyramid. That someone after the flood, visited Egypt and copied the texts that later found their way onto the pages of our Bibles, does in no way infer that they were not inspired writings. On the contrary, if they are Enochian in origin, then they must have been truly inspired. Could the pyramids be an earthly symbol of the eternal Word of God made of permanent stone, an image of the enduring reality of the truths of Scripture? Francis Barris was close to the mark when he wrote, "And in stones the character and images of celestial things are often found. The stones at Giza in the form of the Great Pyramid are stacked upon each other level upon level, reaching slightly over 480 feet, forming the largest book on Earth. It is also the oldest. As we will learn throughout this study, not only was the Great Pyramid actually covered in millions of tiny inscriptions studied and copied by the learned of bygone ages, but the architectural designs of the exterior and interior areas of the monuments convey deep spiritual truths hidden for millennia. Another layer of the pillar symbolism must also be explored here. The prophet Isaiah wrote that the pillar in Egypt was a sign and a witness. The use of stones to witness some historical event is virtually timeless. The book of Jasher provides us with one of the best examples. Jacob, later renamed Israel by God, was in love with one of Laban's daughters, and they came to a verbal agreement that he would labor for Laban 7 years to earn her hand in marriage. Jacob fulfilled his word, but Laban did not, and the former agreed to another 7 years, Jacob receiving 2 wives, but only one that he wanted. After 14 years and a conflict between Jacob and Laban, in the presence of witnesses, they raised a heap of stones, and Jacob said, "This heap is a witness between me and thee." 40. The site became the famous Gilead. This heap of stones, like a cairn, was a witness to others that Jacob and Laban settled their differences, and it was a reminder that the 2 men had made a covenant binding agreement. The institution of a covenant is integral to understanding the purpose of the pyramid. Also in the book of Jasher, we learn that when Abraham was taking Isaac to the mountain to sacrifice his son at the request of God, Abraham looked from a distance over the land and saw a pillar of fire upon the mountain that extended into the sky, and the glory of God was seen in the cloud. Abraham was astonished and asked the others in the group if they too saw these things, but only Isaac could see them. He deduced from this that the phenomenon was a sign from God that Isaac was an acceptable offering. 41. Fortunately, the act of sacrifice was not God's plan, and Isaac lived and fathered Jacob, but God used the event to establish a covenant between Abraham and all of his future offspring and himself. Thus, the sign of the pillar was the sign of the covenant, the pillar of fire. This was confirmed in Genesis, where at the heap of stones erected by Jacob and Laban, Jacob also took up a stone and set it up for a pillar. 42. Jacob was then told by God to move to Bethel and build an altar. At Bethel, the Lord visited Jacob and renewed the covenant between Abraham's seed and himself. It was then that Jacob underwent a profound transformation, albeit symbolically. His name was changed to Israel. In commemoration of the event, Jacob erected a pillar of stone at Bethel to witness that this covenant was permanent. 43. This pillar of stone was the altar that Jacob built at Bethel, which means house of God, just as in Egypt the pillar pyramid, according to Isaiah, was an altar of God. A pillar and an altar, a covenant and name change. These are the elements to an incredible arcanum involving the identity of the Great Pyramid. Remember them. This was not the first time that Jacob had erected a pillar to commemorate some important event. He had a spectacular vision of a ladder set up on the earth, and the top of it reached to the heavens, and behold, the angels of God ascending and descending on it. 44. In this vision, the voice of the Lord promised him that he would renew the covenant that he had made with his father and grandfather Abraham. When Jacob awoke in the morning, he was terrified, took the stone he was using for a pillow, and made a pillar because he believed the site was the gate of heaven, saying, "And this stone which I have set for a pillar shall be God's house." This association between the pillar and ladder motif is very important, as the ladder is the symbol of ascension. In ancient symbol worship, we learned that in the early history of mankind, the pillar became the universal symbol of the deity. Also, we discover that the artificial hills of stone so commonly found around the world were used to represent the dwelling place of God, serving as a witness to the people that he lived among them. Joshua erected a great stone pillar before the leaders of the tribes of Israel before the conquest of Canaan to show them that their covenant with God was renewed, and King Josiah, almost 800 years later, stood beside a pillar when he made a covenant with the Lord. 46. The pillar as a symbol is a more condensed form of the divine tree, typified by the architectural column. This alludes that there is a hidden meaning in the Genesis record concerning the Edenic paradise wherein stood two trees, one of knowledge and the other of life. The pillar pyramid of the Sethites symbolized the tree of knowledge, for it was covered in the knowledge of the history and science of the old world. Enoch witnessed in vision the three mountains of the blessed land represented in the image of the dismembered tree, which by extension identifies the pillar. But there is yet another layer of the archaic symbolism of the pillar we must explore. All right, page 52. Pillar or divine mountain. The Sumerian writings tell of a mysterious mountain somewhere here on Earth that was called Mashu. This is made more intriguing by the geological fact that there are no mountains in the lands of summer in southern Iraq. Concerning Mount Mashu, these texts read, "On high to the celestial band it is connected, below to the lower world it is bound." 47. Here is a belief in a mountain that linked heaven to earth and earth to the underworld. According to the Herder Dictionary of Symbols, this Sumerian mountain had two peaks. It was this world mountain that the realm of the dead could be accessed. The celestial band refers to the 12 zodiacal constellations along the ecliptic plane, the path of the sun and moon and other planets. This procession of images told an ancient story, a prophecy. Even the individual stars of the various constellations were given significant and meaningful names that contributed to this stellar theology. Those not initiated gazed upon the heavens and saw only stars and patterns attached only to legends and lore, mythologies that covered knowledge rather than divulged it. The history of the future was recorded in this way, and the story behind the original zodiac is so profound that it is discussed with meticulous detail in this author's other work, Descent of the Seven Kings. Perhaps it is this same mountain referred to in this very old Sumerian temple hymn. Enduring place, light-hued mountain, which in artful fashion was founded, its dark hidden chamber is an awe-inspiring place. In a field of supervision it lies. Awesome its ways, no one can fathom. 48. This is an adequate description of the Great Pyramid as any given today. Those Sumerian scribes that had written this were those descended from people who had survived the deluge. Originally, the Great Pyramid was in artful fashion, covered in large 20-ton blocks of white limestone facing stones that were covered along the lower third of the monument is writings, text burned into the highly polished stones rather than etched in by tools. A field of supervision is one that is guarded or protected. We recall here that Surid, before the flood, had appointed a guardian to the Great Pyramid complex, one we identify today as the Sphinx. This mountain of the Sumerians is no different in function than their tree of life. This tree was also called the pillar and served as a ladder that connected the underworld with earth and heaven. 49. In their mythology, it was the goddess Anyanya, who rescued this ladder from the flood. She had also descended into the depths of the underworld by virtue of this pillar. The protector of this tree was a guardian of the underworld demons and the sentry before the gate of Anu, heaven. His name was Lord of the Good Tree, or Ning-Ish Zida. Ning-Ish Zida. 50. A variant reading of his name means Lord of the Trees of Life. Incredibly, this etymological artifact, popularly known as Giza today, is descended from this epithet. Nin Lord Gishzi Tree, Da Good. Nin Gishzi. Da. I don't know if I'm supposed to read that all in one or like whatever. The Sumerian tree of life was little different from that of the early Germanic people who called it Irminsul, which was to the Vikings known as, I used to be able to say it, Yggdrasil, I can't say it, Yggdrasil. Irminsul is a pillar that supports the world, a bridge between heaven and earth. The name Irminsul derives from that ancestral hero called Irmin or Irminus. Great wooden pillars were erected in his honor, and by all accounts, this figure was none other than a Germanic Hermes or Enoch. Irminsul was the pillar of the universe, the polar axis that also supported the pole star and was important to the order of the cosmos because it kept the stellar foundation. 50. To the ancients, the space in the heavens between the Great Bear constellation, the seven stars, and the pole star they revolved around, which they considered as the cosmic tree, was known as the Sampo, or the many-ciphered cover, an allusion to knowledge hidden among the stars. John Major Jenkins, in Galactic Alignment, records that the word Sampo is derived from Sanskrit from skamba, or pillar. As will be seen in this book, the surface writings that cover the Great Pyramid long ago indeed served as a many-ciphered cover. The Norse version was Yggdrasil, the world tree or tree of life, which was also the pillar that connected heaven, Asgard, the earth, Midgard, and the underworld's own three departments. It was a ladder by which the mystic masters could ascend and descend into the spirit world. This tree was watered by a well from the underworld, and the tree was also referred to as a sacred mountain. 52. Two elements that directly link it to the Great Pyramid. At the base of this tree stood the three Norns, three goddesses that represented the past, the present, and the future, all being descriptions of the knowledge placed on the Great Pyramid. Yggdrasil was represented by two Nordic runes that bind together to form the runic glyph for the world tree. The life rune merges with the death rune to form the symbol for the great tree Yggdrasil. The three branches of this tree form aspects of the city of the gods, which was supported by the pillar or earth above the three roots, which represented the three departments of the underworld: the land of the dead, the land of the black elves, and the land of the giants. 53. The merging of these two runes forms a symbol so old that even writers as early as the first millennium BC mistook it for a representation of a lightning bolt, which later contributed to its use by ancient artisans who created masterpieces depicting Zeus, Thor, Hanum of ancient America, Ninurta, and a host of other deities holding this symbol in their grasp. Historian and translator A. Smith Palmer, in his 1897 Babylonian Influence on the Bible and Popular Beliefs, wrote that the glyph used by Merodach to defeat the chaos dragon named Tiamat symbolized lightning, the same weapon found in Genesis 3:24, described as a flame of the turning weapon that prevented access back to the tree of life after mankind had taken from the tree of knowledge. 54. While Palmer's assertions are very consistent with later interpretations of other antiquarians who had also misunderstood the symbol, is found not only in reliefs at Sumer, Babylonia, and Assyria, but even in early India, China, Japan, Greece, Gaul, Egypt, and as mentioned in early America. No doubt that future excavations will yield forth many more examples of this symbol's importance to the earliest artisans. It was not a lightning bolt. In every instance, the symbol conveys that its wielder holds the power of life and death. One incredible example of the employment of this symbol is found in the famous painting of Nagarjuana, now housed in Japan, 55. It is over 1,000 years old and depicts the Chinese hero and esotericist Nagarjuana with distinctly non-Chinese features holding the the picture. Incidentally, this name derives from a Sanskrit title, Naga, dragon, and Arjuna, an Indian hero. The sacred mountain motif is one of extreme antiquity, found among the earliest cultures, and is directly related by all to the divine tree. The Todas peoples told of a mountain called Makurti, which stands at the navel of the earth, a towering rock upon a tableland, of which the souls of the dead assemble for the leap into the abyss of waters that lies between them and the mount of heaven. 56. This tableland is the great plateau on which rests the Great Pyramid. Again, we have here a connection to waters below the structure. Old Miztec traditions tell of the appearance of two gods who, by their immense knowledge and omnipotence, made a great rock upon which they built a very sumptuous palace, a masterpiece of skill in which they made their abode on earth. This palace was upon a mountain, and the rock was called the Place of Heaven, according to Gerald Massey in his The Natural Genesis, 57. The Aztec Nahuatl myths tell that the enormous pyramids of Teotihuacan were also built by gods long ago, by knowers of occult things, possessors of the traditions, and that they were built before a disastrous catastrophe. 58. Truly, the Aztecs did not know who built the pyramids they found in their country or the ruinous cities of living stone that had occupied by the earlier Toltecs, who did not know their origin either, but they merely affixed their own cultural memories to the sites because of their obvious mysteriousness and connections to the pyramid motifs. The Aztecs were certainly not alien to the secrets of the pyramid. Their god of death was called Mictlan, who lived in a region where the dead repaired after life at a place named Tlaxico at the navel of the earth. 59. Lewis Spence in The Problem of Atlantis shows that the Aztecs believed that their lord of fire, named I can't say it. Exotectili dwelt at the navel of the earth and entered the blue stone pyramid. He was the old god, older than the present gods who lived prior to the foundation of the present world. Like the Germanic and Viking traditions, the Huron and Iroquois told the first Christian missionaries that the underworld could be entered by crossing over a deep and swift river by means of a bridge made out of a tree. 60. In fact, many Native American groups had beliefs very similar to these and those of the Aztecs. The same can be said of the Chickasaws concerning the great mounds and pyramids of the Mississippi Valley, who believed the area with its extensive earthen ruins was the center of the earth. 61. This means that these people had retained ancestral memories going back millennia to a time where they as a people knew of a place at the center of where the earth stood massive architecture. There have been excavated pyramids in North America, Mexico, several in the Yucatan regions, and even in South America. All of the cultures having come in contact with these ruins maintain similar ideas concerning their origin, often identifying them with some primordial holy mountain. This remains cognate evidence that somewhere in the dim past all these people shared a common ancestral link fragmented by the passage of time. The Zoroastrian beliefs of Iran tell of the Sinvat Bridge, which connects this world to the next. Souls judged worthy to pass over enter Aranya, Vaja, the domain of the immortals, a paradise world curiously centered at Kavan Aranthura, the center of the Earth's landmass. 62. But as the dead who are adjudged wicked attempt to pass over, they are dragged down into the depths of darkness. Traditions of the Arana Vaja concern two divine trees, and in Azerbaijan, even Enoch is remembered as associated with Arana Vaja. 63. In Andrew Collins's meticulously researched book entitled From the Ashes of Angels, Forbidden Legacy of a Fallen Race, we learn that the Persian scholars accepted the Iranian mythological locations were often changed to suit the landscape in which the stories were told. 64. Collins' research has yielded forth two significant finds relative to our study. One, in the Genesis Apocryphon found among the Dead Sea Scrolls, we learned that Methuselah sought for his father Enoch when Noah was born, journeying to a place called Parwain, where the patriarchal prophet was residing with angels. Collins discovered that Mandaean traditions mention both Anush, Enoch, and Mount Parwan, a white mountain derived from the root Parswana, which means frontier. 65. This white mountain is none other than the Great Pyramid in its original architectural condition, covered with white limestone casing blocks, which were discovered in 1837 AD by Colonel Vyss. A monument, according to the prophet Isaiah, was located at the border, frontier to the Lord. Secondly, Collins wrote that Mandaean traditions tell of the souls after death that go to a heavenly realm called Thahil, a god of the dead, after flying over a white mountain called Sur, where souls adjudged righteous journey on to the pole star. 66. Collins believes that Thahil means the god Ta of Egypt, which is probably correct, for Mount Sur is merely an abbreviated form of Serad, where the Great Pyramid was erected according to ancient Arabic texts. The old root Sur is also found in the Islamic traditions of the bridge Al-Sirat, where the faithful pass into paradise, which is situated in the seventh heaven, a bridge over the abyss. Burmese mythology has the same imagery with an upper world, a middle world, and an underworld. The middle world has at its center a flat area where stands a very high mountain on which stands a palace of the superior spirits. No mortal can pass beyond these central borders. Incredibly, this majestic area is covered by dust, but beneath the dust is very hard stone, which remarkably is sustained by water. Under the water is an open area full of air. Like Mount Meru of the Hindus, this mountain extends from heaven to earth and earth to the world below. 67. Harold T. Wilkins in Secret Cities of Old and South America recorded that the old Hindus stated that the pyramids in India and Egypt were merely copies of the primordial mountain at the center of the world called Meru. Mount Meru was guarded by a dreadful dragon, the Sphinx, and Daniel Burstyn in The Discoverers cites that Buddhist traditions hold that Mount Meru lies between the four worlds, divided between the four cardinal directions, and that it was square at the bottom. Anyone who has seen a pyramid from an aerial view can easily find its base to be square. Other elements of the Burmese beliefs need be reviewed here. At the base of the mountain on the flat area, plateau, were 3 enormous rubies, and around the mountain are 7 concentric circles of lesser mountains which feed 7 great rivers that water the earth. The earth consists of 4 continents that lie at the 4 cardinal directions. As rubies are precious stones, these 3 are the 3 gigantic pyramids at Giza, the 2 largest being the Great Pyramids, which is perfectly aligned with its faces positioned facing north, east, south, and west. The reference to 7 rivers is an obvious memory of the Egyptian Delta, for the Great Pyramid Plateau lies at the apex of this branching out of 7 rivers. Other distinct cultures isolated far away from Egypt preserve these same ideas. Without interrupting this work to examine them all, we will finish with one particular interest. The Camolas Indians of Guatemala thought of the present world as a square island riddled with underworld caves that were inhabited by demons and earth lords, but the sky was a multi-tiered pyramid supported by a gigantic tree. As will be shown, beneath the Giza surface is a maze of tunnels, galleries of rock and chambers, most now filled with water and closed to the public. Though the more primitive peoples have retained less information, we are very fortunate that curious antiquarians long ago, as well as secret societies and religious sects, have recognized the importance of these truths and have preserved them for future dissemination. Among these are the Kabbalists and Gnostics, Jewish esotericists, and Egyptian Christian mystics. Supporting the Guatemalan traditions, we learn that the Kabbalists believed that the tunnels of Set beneath the day side of the Tree of Life was where dwelt evil spirits called the Olopoth. Though Set is the older Egyptian deity, it is merely a memory of Seth, one of the chief builders of the Great Pyramid complex before the flood. The Kabbalists maintain that there is a heavenly and an earthly paradise, and Eden below and above. The erudite General Massey wrote, "The two are united by a fixed pillar called Strength of the Hill of Zion, somewhat like the colossal pillar Irminsul, which bears up the heavens. The souls that enter the dwellings of the lower paradise are permitted to ascend by this pillar." 68. Massey had not connected all of the seemingly random universals from around the world as has been done in this study, so he probably did not comprehend how profound this statement truly was. He was writing about the Great Pyramid in Egypt and didn't even know it. The Hill of Zion pyramid is the pillar called Strength by the Kabbalists, and the pillar before the door to Solomon's temple had an inscription upon it that was translated, "In it is strength." Additionally, according to the Jubilees text, Zion was at the center of the navel of the earth. This was a piece of evidence that led to the conclusion that the Great Pyramid was a type of book, so we should not be amazed to find this curious passage in the Book of Jubilees concerning the future judgment by fire. "And on that day of cursing and turbulence, he will also burn with devouring fire. As he burned Sodom, thus also will he burn his land and his city and all that is his, and he, the condemned, will be erased out of the book of the discipline of the sons of men. And he shall not ascend into the book of life, for he shall be destroyed and shall depart to the eternal curse." 70. And with this gem, we return to our theory presented herein that the Great Pyramid, constructed to warn the world of a far distant future flood of fire descending upon the earth from the heavens, is indeed a stone book, even an image of the eternal word of God. The Book of Life, and this... Shoot, hold on. Let me say that all over again. Oh, well, And with this gem, we return to our theory presented herein that the Great Pyramid, constructed to warn the world of a far distant future flood of fire descending upon the earth from the heavens, is indeed a stone book, even an image of the eternal Word of God, the Book of Life. And this is the greatest secret among the historic Gnostics, a sect of Egyptians with very Christian-like beliefs that knew that the deeper things of God were discernible and learned through the teachings of the Logos, the Greek name for the Word. According to the Gnostic work entitled Pistis Sophia, Enoch was taken into heaven, where he stood in the presence of God, while the books of Jehu were dictated to him. Another tradition holds that he learned the holy books of Jehu when he visited a holy mountain. 71. Jehu is a Gnostic variant of the truly archaic rendering of the Hebrew title of God as Jah. In fact, the epithet Messiah used to describe Christ is a compound of the Egyptian word mes, rebirth, and the Hebrew Aya, Ja, 72. According to the Gnostics, Jeo declared, "It is necessary for men to gain knowledge of the mysteries which are in the books of Jeo, those that I caused to be written by Enoch in paradise when I spoke to him from the tree of knowledge and the tree of life. And I caused him to place them upon the rock of Ararat. And I set up Kalapataroth, the Archon, who is above in Gamit, him who is under the feet of Jeru, and who makes all aeons and all destinies revolve. That same Archon I set over to watch the books of Jeru, to protect them from the flood, and also that no Archon seized with jealousy about them might destroy them." 73. Somewhere on earth, upon a mountain, were engraved the books of Jeru, which are at the site protected by a watcher, Archon, that protects them from being destroyed. The reference to the trees of life and knowledge return us back to the rich symbolism of the pillar and its function as a ladder between heaven and earth. The Watchers are found numerous times throughout the Book of Enoch, an order of angelic beings that, due to some primordial controversy concerning the existence and destiny of humankind, separated into two factions. Some among the rebellious Watchers went even further and directly intervened in the affairs of men and descended to earth, having been imprisoned by the Creator when the world was destroyed by the deluge. Then there were others, like this Kalapataroth, who remained faithful to the Creator, protecting his interests on earth. The Watchers were popularly known in antiquity as guardians of portals and entrances between worlds. They were keepers of the ancient wisdom, 74, and it was a mighty Watcher that stood at the gates of Eden, preventing the first humans from going back into Eden after they were banished. The Egyptian Coptic translation of the Pistis Sophia is merely the translation of an older translation. The earliest known copy of the text was in Greek, naturally, as it was an Alexandrian writing, and this is easily ascertained due to the abundant Greek words left untranslated in the Coptic manuscript, 75. In fact, the majority of ancient manuscripts extant today are but translations of translations, and rarely are texts found in their original language. The first book of Jeru reveals that Iao dwells in the center of heaven as the eons revolve around him. He is the first mystery, and from his position at the treasury of light was a gate to the regions of the three Amens. 76. Amen signifies the hidden one, here represented by the number 3. The Gnostics cleverly called him by the acronym of IAO. This is the combining of alpha and omega prefixed with the determinative determinative for the Hebrew Jah, Yeo. The Pistis Sophia claims that Enoch learned the book of Jehu at a holy mountain, but then also that he learned from them from the tree of gnosis, knowledge, disparity, or an admission that both are one and the same. As there stand two gigantic pyramids at Giza in alignment with one another geometrically and geodetically, with the cardinal directions, we find that there are only two books of Jehu. While there stands a third member of the Great Pyramids at Giza, the third is fundamentally different than the two gigantic ones. It was called the Red Pyramid, is much smaller with less mass. It was covered in beautiful limestone with inscriptions like the other two. It must also be noted here that in the Genesis account, the tree of knowledge was of good and evil. The fall of man was partially due to a newfound awareness of evil and man's capacity to succumb to it. But this acquisition of information was not entirely to our detriment, for God provided a balance, a gnosis of good and evil knowledge, the good concealed in divine mysteries that serve to aid the diligent researcher in getting to the tree of life, the embodied word of God. The mysteries of the Gnostics lead us to the book of the Secrets of Enoch, wherein we discover that the 10th heaven was where God dwells, which in the Hebrew tongue is called Aravat 77. This is probably the rock of Ararat mentioned in the Pistis Sophia that is protected by an archon. The mountain commonly known as Ararat is not in Egypt at all, but Armenia and modern Turkey, popular for being the landing place of the Ark of Noah after the Great Flood. Ararat may have been the actual name known to the pre-flood peoples given to the Great Pyramid, and as Noah would have known all about the monument, which was still being constructed when he was born, he may have named the mountain Ararat when the vessel came to a stop. At Giza, the primary architectural features are the two huge pyramids, the third and smaller red pyramid, the Sphinx, but there are 7 other smaller pyramidical structures alongside the Great Pyramids. Altogether, on the Giza Plateau are 10 pyramids, a sum very significant to the Hebrew mystics, which held that it signified perfect completion and was the number for God. Remarkably, 10 is the third and most important triangular number of the Kabbalists and Pythagoreans. Early methods of counting led to a discovery. Different amounts of stones put together form various shapes. The numbers 3, 6, and 10 form triangular numbers and are derived themselves from unique mathematical formula, 78. 10 was considered the supreme and divine equation. Philolaus of Tarentum wrote that this number was the embodiment of perfection, and the shape of the triangle was believed to contain the unutterable name of God, 79. Though we have seen how the word pyramid means pillar of fire, the Coptics went so far as to claim that this was derived from pyramid, or a 10th part of numbers, 80. The reference here to the name of God hidden within the shape of the triangle calls to mind the early Masonic records earlier examined that claimed that Enoch built a temple before the flood that contained an agate triangle that hid the name of God. This tradition was no doubt borrowed from the exact belief of the Greeks, 81. Some of the reasoning of the old writers may have been slightly warped, such as Philo's opinion that the number 10 was perfect because the tops of mountains after the deluge, being pointed, appeared in the number of the decade, triangular, 82. But this alone does not negate the significance in the parallels between various texts and cultures in the belief of this number's importance and relation to God. Because our most remote ancestors refused to call God by an earthly name, the pyramid served as the perfect glyphic representation of the deity because it was a 3-sided figure, an image of the holy mountain. He was simply referred to as the Nameless, and titles like El, Jah, Adonai, the Lord, and the Eternal or Maker were merely employed to describe him. In the very old writings of India, known as the Rig Veda, we read, "Though one, he is called by the learned by many names. His name was so sacred that it could not be uttered by the human tongue, so our earliest priests and prophets fashioned epithets to describe him, and artisans molded wonderful glyphic representations. Among one of the most curious of these symbols designed to represent the name of the great giver of light, 83, among the Egyptians, Mexicans, and other civilizations spread abroad, looked like this little picture right there. One of the most intriguing aspects early theologians attached to that of God was that he was a door. For this reason, the symbolic representation of the name of God also took on the meaning of a gate or door. In the Hebrew and Phoenician alphabets, the Daleth also meant door, being the 4th letter, a symbol also found on the famous Moabite stone, 84. The Egyptian determinative for door was the same, being Mer, 85. Because gates and doors connect different areas, some cultures affix different meanings to the glyphs. According to the Imperial Dictionary of King Hai, the triangle is a sign of union in ancient China, 86. It was Jacob who erected the pillar of stone and called it the gate, door of heaven, the pillar identifying the more expansive symbol of the holy mountain that unifies heaven and earth. This mountain is the door, represented by God, who alone provides access. The Egyptian myrrh, seems to have been preserved throughout the lower Pacific Ocean in Melanesia, Polynesia, and Micronesia, where are found numerous pyramidical structures on the island chains universally known as Mare, as found in John Macmillan Brown's research in the middle of the Pacific. Again, the similarity with Meru, the mountain at the center of the world, cannot be ignored. Almost done, but I need a sip of coffee. That a divine mountain connecting our world to both the heavens and the underworld, a place that was accessible to us long ago, is a constant theme of the ancients. Such a location is also alluded to in the 2nd millennium BC text known as the Enuna Elish, or 7 tablets of the Babylonian creation epic. The Babylonian hero was Marduk, who went to battle against a powerful demonic lord named Kingu, a war deity allied to the chaos dragon Tiamat who resided in the deep. Kingu robbed the Lord High God, then named Enlil, of the tablets of destinies that contained the eternal truths of the past, present, and future. But the hero Marduk wrested them away from the demon lord. Marduk would later destroy Tiamat with a weapon that looked like this, that little guy right there. After defeating Kingu, Marduk then made a gate to the deep, so the hordes of demons and Kingu could not steal from Enlil again. He bolted the gate shut and set a guardian over it to ensure that the evil watchers of chaos would not rise again. 87. Here we have the retold, albeit earlier, story of the prehistoric theft of the heavenly knowledges, and their restoration on earth. The tablets of destinies is akin to the tree of knowledge, or the book of Jehu, and the watcher is the archon named Kalapataroth, represented by the guardian Sphinx, the same guardian placed there by Surid before the flood, or Enoch. This gate to the underworld is also found within the writings of the Jewish historian Josephus, who 2,000 years ago wrote that the Sethites erected the pillars of Sirad, Egypt. Josephus wrote concerning the lake of unquenchable fire and where it lies hidden that there is one descent into this region at whose gate we believe there stands an archangel with a host, which gate when those pass through that are conducted down by the angels that are appointed over souls. 88. The archangel would again be identified as the Sphinx, which was long ago known to be the composite of a lion, bull, man, and eagle, identifying the tetramorph or 4 divine archangels of the book of Revelation that usher in the apocalypse. The Sphinx with the face of a man, body of a calf, bull, paws of a lion, also long ago had painted along its flanks the wings of an eagle. Josephus does not claim that this gate to the underworld is the Giza complex, but nor does he cite where this descent is located. As a historian, borrowing his information from many older sources available to him 2 millennia ago, we must consider these fragments in light of other glimpses in fragmented texts, because all accounts of the Great Pyramid complex have been passed down from times after the flood by cultures that in themselves only preserved various parts of the whole. Because today we have access to so many of these fragmented beliefs, we are beginning to put back together the pieces of this astonishing arcanum, parts of the whole even found within the Holy Scriptures among the particular old Psalms. Who shall ascend into the hill of the Lord, or who shall stand in his holy place? He that hath clean hands and a pure heart, who hath not lifted up his soul unto vanity, nor sworn deceitfully. Lift up your hands, O ye gates, even lift them up, ye everlasting doors, and the King of Glory shall come in. Selah, 89. Okay, page 64, mysterious relation to the number 7. The triangle was also used by the Egyptians as a numeral, the hieroglyph representing the number 7, because the symbol is a representation of the three-dimensional triangle or pyramid. We find the Egyptian glyph simple yet sophisticated. The triangle has 3 sides, but the pyramid has 4 faces, and the imagery combines here to account for the 790. This number was considered divine, a holy number that identified time itself. The phenomenon of time was linked to the motion of the celestial bodies, perfectly understood by the Egyptians. They religiously watched the movements of the planets, called wanderers and gods, for it was believed that their movements affected things on Earth, such as droughts, famines, invasions, periods of peace, victory, or even death. Their own belief in this respect were no different than those of the Near East and abroad. Diodorus wrote that the Chaldeans believed that every event in the heavens has its meaning as part of the eternal scheme of divine forethought. 91. During those early epochs, astrology was a type of religious astronomy, and the universal mode of communication understood by all the sages and scribes of different cultures was by numbers, a language of universal application. The number 7 was of particular importance to these astrotheologies. There were only 7 known celestial bodies in the creation, not among the fixed and unmovable stars. These were the wanderers, the planets of our solar system, and the sun and moon. The 5 known planets were thought to be divine beings because they on their own volition moved against the backdrop of starry hosts that seemed implacable and fixed, and their passing close to Earth or their conjunction with another planet often signified great portents or divine revelations. The sun and moon were used to tabulate the more popular calendrical systems, but lesser known timekeeping methods recording the cyclic conjunction of the planets were employed to record the approach and passing of the great year, a 600-year period fully explained in Descent of the Seven Kings. The Chaldeans of Babylon pictorially represented their concept of time being symbolized by the number 7, which was divided into 3 distinct parts: solar, lunar, and stellar, like the Chaldean star depicted in the illustration. 92. This geometrical calendar demonstrates how time, though measured by sevens, is continual. The end of the 7-day cycle of the week, here depicted by the sun, moon, and 5 planets, ends with the 7th planet. However, the 7-pointed pattern is not complete until the 8th day is reached, which incidentally is the first of the 7 days of another calendar. For this reason, the number 8 for at least 3,000 years in the mysteries and by numerologists has been the number for new beginnings. The 1 and 8 are synonymous when the number 7 is geometrically depicted. We find this maintained even as late as the Christian apocryphal writings such as the Epistles of Barnabas, which reveals that after the 7 ages of the world pass, God says, "I shall begin the 8th day, that is, the beginning of the other world." 93. Perhaps this is but a memory of the older book of Enoch, which conveys that there are 7 weeks, ages of early history, followed by an 8th week of universal peace and harmony. In the Genesis account, the world was renovated from the ruin of chaos in 6 days, but the 7th day indicated the rest and activity of God. However, it required an 8th day, which is actually the first now, in order for another week to follow. The Babylonian Enuma Elish was written in cuneiform upon 7 tablets and tells of the 7 stages of conflict that resulted in the creation and establishment of Marduk as supreme among the gods. But an 8th stage clearly must follow to verify that anything was indeed established. Though the number 10 is holy and heavenly, the number 7 seems to refer to perfection on earth. We were made from elements of the earth, and on the earth, the spectrum of light as perceived on the human visual bandwidth is divided into 7 primary colors. What we call the rainbow, the glass prism dividing ordinary sunlight. Even in music, the completion of 7 tones brings one back to the exact same note, but an octave higher, the Latin root octo meaning 8, 94. It is not without design that our present numeral for the number 8 appears in such a way as to have no beginning or end. The deeper we delve into the secrets of nature and the mechanics of God's creative work, we find that numbers indeed provide us many amazing revelations. Not only did God create or renovate everything in 7 days, but according to the revelation, he shall destroy the civilizations of the world by the repetitions of 7, the 7 seals, 7 trumpets, 7 mysterious thunders, and the 7 vials, bowls of wrath will be affected against earth, and the 7-headed dragon of chaos, symbolic of 7 demonic kings, will be vanquished at the end of the 7th age before he ushers in the 8th age, millennial earth. Thus, the number 7 is a terrestrial number relative to humanity and the world we live in, a number embodying the concept of time. The 7-pointed calendar star was also known to the Norse and Celts. Amazingly, their depiction parallels the seemingly older model used by the Chaldeans and employed the use of runes. Runes were a part of the sacred alphabet that the Norse believed was a gift from the gods of their ancestors, and they believed to have divine properties. For this reason, they were used sparingly. The Celtic calendar, 95, mirrors the function of the Chaldean one perfectly. The two are identical and conclusive evidence that they share a common belief, if not a common origin. The 7 points represent the 7 days of the week, and their runes identify other properties, real or imagined, that were enjoyed by the days they signify. One thing of interest concerning the Celtic version is the rune of the 7th day, a rune encapsulated within a pyramid symbol. This is beyond coincidence. The Celtic priests, be they druids or others, must have related the triangle to the concept of time. In Lost Language of Symbolism, we are shown old symbols representing the spiritual fire of the universe, which startlingly is associated with the soul's goal of ascent. See figure A, 96. The spiritual fire is shown to have 7 points, a flame connected by a thin pillar of 3 dots. In the next archive and later in this book, the significance of this symbol will become more comprehensible as it reveals a connection to 3 stars and the inner architectural alignments of the Great Pyramid. See figure B for a similar motif, which has been described as a bull's head, 97. While this could allude to the import of Taurus in the zodiac, this author is convinced that the effigy is actually that of a dragon's head, which would link this to the stellar dragon Alpha Draconis, the pre-flood pole star in the Draco constellation, a circumpolar constellation. The horns, artistically, be they of a bull or dragon, identify the 2 pillars that mark the path to the entrance to eternity. This is why this representation must be that of a dragon. The pole star was considered the celestial gate to God in the realms of heaven, and Draco had dutifully guarded that area of the heavens where Taurus's horns are nowhere near the ancient pole star. The stunning alignments within the Great Pyramid, as seen in the next archive, make this the more plausible interpretation. The very earliest appearance of the 7-pointed star is found upon the archaic Assyria-Babylonian seal that depicts a man in reverence to a pillar that stands upon a solid foundation. The pillar has a ladder painted upon it, and the pillar has above it a 7-pointed star glyph, 98. Intriguingly, the ladder has 8 rungs. This symbolic ladder, seen in the illustration, is the same as that venerated by the mystics called Scala Perfectionis, or Ladder of Perfection, the favorite emblems representing the roadway to the gods, 99. This ancient seal conveyed that somewhere on earth, typified by the foundation stone, was a gateway, possibly in the form of a stone monument typified by the pillar symbol, that opened up to heaven typified by the latter, which would open at a designated time, typified by the 7-point star, known only to God, inferred by placement of a star over pillar. The seal, which was a visual description of the personal faith and belief of the owner, probably depicts himself as the man shown. He knew that time itself must reach an eighth part before he could obtain this hope of gaining access from heaven to earth. The monument alluded to in the seal is the Great Pyramid, the stone image of the terrestrial number 7. It is the pillar or gateway that will one day open, merging the world we know now with that which will come. So it should come as no surprise to learn that the standard measurement used in the geometry of the pyramids at Giza was time itself. In a unique work entitled Beginnings, the Sacred Design, author Bonnie Gaunt exhibits a startling discovery. An avid researcher into the mysteries of numbers and biblical gematria and how they coincide with features of the Great Pyramid. Gaunt made the connection between the exterior and interior passage angles of the Great Pyramid surface, which are sloped at 52 degrees. The ascending passage and descending passage are both angled within the monument at 26 degrees and from one another at 52 degrees. The elusive 52-degree angle can only be produced by one geometrically perfect symbol, the heptagram, or 7-pointed star, 100. The exterior sloping angle of the Great Pyramid at 52 degrees was a problem for the ancient Egyptians. After the completion of the Giza structures, no other pyramids in the world replicated this 52-degree angle. Egyptologists are at a loss to explain away this discrepancy, fancying to ignore all evidence that promotes the view that the Giza monuments may not have been erected by the ancient Egyptians, as we have been force-fed to believe for so long. There were many attempts to copy the angle, but all met with disastrous results. Many are the mounds of stone along the Nile River that were once pyramid projects. Some never even finished. A couple of these projects were documented to have collapsed during construction. The unit of measurement employed in the laying out of the Giza pyramids was a solar unit, meaning that the unit of measurement employed in building the Great Pyramid was Earth-Sun consumerate. Did I say that right? Commensurate. Presently, it takes our planet 365.25 days to encircle the sun, always traveling along the orbital belt at an average distance away from it of about 93 million miles. This is a vast ring we travel, one we call a year, and we divide 365.25 by 52, we get 7.02. Thus, 52 days in the duration by which it takes our planet to move 1/7 of its distance around the sun. This alone should be cause enough for the serious consideration of a non-Egyptian origin for these structures. Men may have built the Great Pyramids, but they did not design them. A greater intellect was at work here, one that gave divine instructions to Enoch and his people. The sun is the unit or medium by which we measure days and years, and it is vitally important to the earth and all living things, including that little gnat. If there be any who have read this far and still believe that men of old on their own initiative could have designed this colossi, the next archive was written for you. The Great Pyramid was erected in such a fashion as to never be duplicated. Ruinous pyramids around the world are an enduring testament to mankind's inability to replicate the works of God. The 7-pointed star, according to Gerald Massey, as published in his lectures, page 235, was the sign of the pyramid and was known to the early Egyptians, who called it Har Kuti, or Lord of Lights, sometimes as Lord of the Glorified Elect. It was related to the Egyptian concept of the eternal world. It would indeed be a remarkable thing to believe that the Great Pyramid was a stone prophecy of the redemption of mankind, filled with numerous geometrical mysteries, and when translated into rectilinear timelines, accurately depicts all of the major events of human history with precision, to find it not mentioned at all in the Holy Writ. This would be a severe blow to this thesis. The fact that the internal architectural geometry is actually a world history timeline has been the subject of several books dating back to 1860 AD, but these earlier authors were led by intuition and inaccurate chronologies of world history or inaccurate measurements, so they were forced to fit facts where they should have been, as opposed to where they are. If the reader seeks to examine the utterly fascinating proof that the Great Pyramid is a calendar of man's past and future, a large book packed with illustrations, see Chronotexture, Lost Science of Prophetic Engineering. But as to the biblical records and their apparent silence concerning this monument, this is untrue. As seen earlier, Zion was a direct reference to the Giza complex, and indirectly the pyramids are mentioned as pillars in the Great Scriptures. But there is one reference that conclusively refers to the Great Pyramid and no other. In the book of the prophet Ezekiel 29:10, we read of the north-south dimensions of Egypt. God reveals that in the future, long after the 8th century BC, Egypt would be laid waste, the entire country, from the Tower of Syene even unto Ethiopia. The Tower of Syene actually translate to the Tower of Seven. Additionally, the stone which was quarried to build the Great Pyramid was long been known by geologists to have been taken from the Syene quarries. Thus, the description, the Tower of Seven, in the scriptures reveals also the source of the stones themselves. The ridiculous argument put forth by some critics that the Tower of Syene is a reference to the Pharos lighthouse off the coast of Alexandria is anachronistic. The Ezekiel text is ancient, antedating the construction of the famous lighthouse by centuries. The geographical borders of Egypt of old were from the Giza area, including Memphis, all the way south past Thebes, Old Waset, to the borders of Ethiopia. The more we learn about this monument, the more we are confronted with deeper mysteries. This was acknowledged by some unnamed sage long ago, for inside the pyramid someone had written, "I am the herald and witness of God. He created me with human feelings and deposited a mystery within me." 101. This was not an original inscription belonging to the monument, but placed there by someone evidently aware of the purpose of this architectural marvel. There is much more we are not told about the Great Pyramid, information concealed by historians and scholars because what they found was not consistent with what they had been taught or employed to propagate. There is a nigh impenetrable mystery about the Gizan monuments that begs the question, why is there so little known about them?